busy talking, but they're on the...
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 12th, 2022 Norfolk Planning Board meeting. This is the first meeting we've been back together for quite a while. We've been doing this on Zoom for many months, so it's good to be back together. We have a pretty full agenda this evening, so let's get right to it. Our first item on this evening's agenda is 100 Pond Street, a special permit application to add dish wireless antennas to existing wireless facility. And since this is a public hearing, Chris will read the notice into the record.
Notice is hereby given in accordance with Mass. GL Section 40A and the Norfolk zoning bylaws, Section F13. A public hearing will be held on Tuesday, April 12, 2022 at 7 p.m. in room 124 at the Norfolk Town Hall, 1 Liberty Lane, Norfolk, Mass., relative to a special permit application for property located at 100R Pond Street in Norfolk, Mass. The applicant, Aerosmith Development of Saratoga Springs, New York, is proposing to install 3 dish wireless antennas with associated equipment to the existing wireless communications facility. The property owned by Interstate Radio Realty Trust. The property is owned by Interstate Radio Realty Trust and is located in the C-1B zoning district. Reference Assessors Map 19, Block 69, Lots 43. The application and plans are available for public inspection on the Town of Norfolk's website, norfolk.ma.us/boards-committees/planning dashboard, or in the office of the Norfolk Planning Board during the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Thursday.
Thank you, Chris. All right, so, Rich, do you wish to say anything to this before we turn to the folks on Zoom to make their case?
Except for the fact that I think at some point we'll need to revisit this bylaw and make some changes to it, but...
Is this as of right?
No, it's a special permit, but it's a little...
Yeah, special permit.
Need some work overall. Beyond that.
But they're complying...
Yeah, they're complying. It's
with
just,
this, as it exists, yeah, all right.
Right.
Okay.
Is there an antenna on there already?
Yeah,
All right, so gentlemen, whoever is speaking for this, please make your case.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Chuck Bertomesso from Aerosmith Development. This co-application is for, as is indicated, is for Dish Network to join an SBA tower lease. SBA leases ground lease equipment, a ground lease with the interstate property owner, and they will not be expanding the tower in any height, nor will they expand the compound area that they're leasing on the ground. So the special, how I look at it is the current blueprint or floor plan that you already approved for the SBA tower and the ground area. I understand you need a special permit when you're adding equipment on top or on the ground. We're not expanding that space at all. It's the reason Dish is joining the fray in the wireless industry is as numerous companies have merged. There's less competition, and Dish is trying to give more people opportunities to have different choices in the wireless communication network. So I will open to questions or answer questions.
Well, I'd like to just have you scroll to the appropriate drawing here with the assistance of our administrative assistant Betsy, so that we can look at the equipment that you're proposing to install.
Betsy, slide 10 would be on the CDs that I sent you. Would be I would think would be if you had the slide 10 of 26.
Yep.
Can that thing go away?
Are these just traditional satellite receiver transmitters?
Yep, exactly. Simple. I could get the measurements for you, but they're going to be like the radio heads and the antennas are going to be up on the tower. But on the ground, I just want to show you that you have currently 3. You currently have 2 other shelters on the ground. We're going to add a 3rd within that compound. The area shows what we're doing in terms of the actual size. The lease area that Dish will be leasing from SBA is only 5 feet wide pad, and then they're going to have their ice bridge along the way that goes up to the tower. But it's going to be a 5 by 7 area in terms of leasing on the ground, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're going to be leasing a few different antennas at different azimuths, 0, 120, and 240. They're 72 inches long and 19 inches wide. So, and the dish, they're going to be at the center line of 105 feet. That is page 11, Betsy. They'll give you how the antennas will be set up, transmitting radio signals.
Now, there are existing antenna on that large one, right?
Yes, that is correct. There are antennas already at 130 feet up off the ground, and this is a guide wire tower that stands 210 feet.
Okay, so these, they're just fitting in below the existing ones, all right.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay,
And slide 11 shows you where they would be in relationship to the other companies.
is that a demonstration of just the new ones that you're adding, or all the ones that are there?
The current ones, that information shows all the current equipment on that tower, sir.
Okay,
And then, so which one's the proposed?
The proposed one on slide 11 shows it at 105, 105 feet, 3 proposed dish wireless antennas,
Yep.
each showing different angles. So there's be 3 antennas, and then there are going to be radio heads behind the antennas.
That previous page?
Yeah, previous one, Betsy.
Previous one?
It's page 11. There it is. Yes, that's it.
So 105 would be the second.
Yep. Well, it's actually, if you go from the bottom up, it'd be the very first
First
one.
one.
Very first
Yeah,
one,
it was the
okay.
first one, yeah. It's kind of hard to read it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a little blurry on our
Right.
screen.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
And then that 5x7 pad, is that just your MPO? That's where you're getting the signal from?
That's it. All the utilities get in there. That's where the computer information translates the information for the radio signal, and then all the cables would go underneath the ice bridge, up along that guide wire tower to those antennas, and to the radio heads, and the radio heads transmitting the information into the antennas.
Okay.
So how big again, sir, is the unit you're putting on the pole?
There'll be 3 antennas that are 72 inches height-wise by 19.6 inches width.
19 inches.
70.
72.
It's like, I always try to explain to people, these antennas are pretty big things,
Yeah, no.
but you look at a traffic light, you don't realize how big those are until they come down on the ground. Those are 3.5 feet, 4 feet tall,
Yeah,
True.
A traffic light themselves.
How big are the ones that are currently on there?
Probably the same height at this time. Again, I don't have those dimensions or that data, because that's not my client.
yeah.
I could look through the structural analysis on the report and tell you what they are. Give me 2 seconds.
No, they're just more antennas of the same type, pretty much.
Do they create any noise, this particular antenna?
I'm sorry, what?
Will it create any noise?
No, the antennas will not create noise.
Any other questions from board members here?
Oh, pretty
No.
straightforward.
Any questions from anyone in the audience out there? All right, well, hearing none, then I propose that we,
We make a motion to close the hearing, and then we'll just draft the decision.
exactly, yeah. All right, so the Chair will entertain a motion to close this public hearing and instruct our town planner to prepare a written decision which we can sign in the near future.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All right, we'll do this via roll call vote. Mr. Searle?
Aye.
Mr. Montfort?
Aye.
Mr. Peck?
Aye.
Mr. Whittleton?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All right, so we've approved this and closed the public hearing, and we'll work on a decision which we will sign in the near future.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Betsy, for all your help. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Chuck.
Have a great day.
Yep, you too.
Yeah.
All right, next,
We got 5 minutes.
son of a gun, we do, yeah. All right, let's skip down to Do we have any meeting minutes? Yes, we do. We have meeting minutes. Why don't we do a couple of meeting minutes? Chris, you can lead the charge on that.
Sure. Motion to review and approve meeting minutes from the March 8th and March 30th.
Just March 8th.
March 8th
Yeah,
meeting
one at-
minutes.
One at a time.
Sorry.
Well, there's no second set, so
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah, okay. I haven't seen the second set.
they're not done. That's
They're not done yet, so
Gotcha.
just the 8th.
Okay, so motion to review and approve the planning board meeting minutes from March 8th, 2022.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right.
Hit the start button.
And again, we'll just do roll call vote because that's a procedure we've gotten used to here on Zoom. Mr. Searle?
Aye.
Mr. Montfort?
Aye.
Mr. Peck?
Aye.
Mr. Weddleton?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, so you've got your minutes. That took about 2 minutes, so we got 3 more. How about Norfolk County Registry of Deeds letter? Rich, you want to talk to us about that? It's in the package here somewhere. I
Yeah, it's in the
presume.
package. So we're having a little technical difficulties that we're trying to, for,
You want to take a minute or two to remedy those, huh?
Isn't that the letter we signed?
I
No,
thought
so-
No.
no, this is a new letter in terms of writing to the registry of deeds.
I put a hard copy, I think I
Oh,
sent it
this
to
is the
you
one in
all.
the new job,
There's a hard copy
Yeah,
in
this
your
is the-
packet, it's
Yeah.
probably towards the back.
Yeah, I'm
longer.
looking.
And I literally took the letter from the town of Millis
Yeah.
and,
Copy.
It is the
It's
last page.
It's the last page.
Yep.
So for those of you that use the Norfolk Registry of Deeds, and I think many do, if you go to their website, you'll see there's plenty of banners there. There was a decision made apparently by the commissioners, to not fill an IT position as a staff person at the Registry of Deeds to deal with IT.
Chief Information Officer.
Chief Information Officer. And I know many communities, and myself included separately as a planner, just using that, understand the vitalness of having that information to us, all of us, right? And have somebody who is on staff, I think is important to make sure whoever is doing their job, they're doing it to the best of their ability. Not that consultants don't do a good job.
was this
but-
going to change to an outside consultant
So it's,
position?
yeah, they're using a consultant base, and I think, the inner workings, like most companies, you have somebody in the house to try to
Liaison.
police the liaison, make sure things are covered, It just seems,
They had a CIO, and they,
yeah, they had. I think, believe they retired, and they didn't want to fill the position. So it seems like a, extremely short-sighted decision.
Well, it's kind of hard to make a personnel decision when we know absolutely nothing about the background. We don't know whether this position really is 40 hours. We don't know any of the facts about why this position was not refilled. I mean, the state right now isn't under an austerity program, so I don't think they have layoffs per se, so it just, the only thing I struggle with is just knowing nothing at all, nothing about why this position should be brought back.
Brought back, yeah.
the Register of Deeds sends out a weekly newsletter, which I subscribe to. And he has for, at this point, almost a year, talked about the reason for the position, why he needs it, to some of the points that Rich made, in addition to, of course, trying to prevent any malware getting into the system, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just a difference of opinion between him and the commissioners. I think there are 3 county commissioners who have taken the position that it should be a consultant. I personally favor having an inside person. As I understand it, he has a staff of 1. Assuming he or she were to be reinstated as CIO, there's a staff of 1. So there would be 2 people responsible for all of the digital recording and record keeping of the registry, of which is enormous, by the way. But
Who's
So,
the register now?
O'Donnell?
Th-
Is it O'Donnell?
this is Riley, isn't it?
No,
No,
I
it's
think it's
O'Donnell.
O'Donnell.
O'Donnell, you're right, it's O'Donnell, excuse me.
Now that you say that, that totally sways me. I mean,
Yeah.
if he wants, and he's running the department, wants the position filled, and outside part-time bureaucrats don't, and I happen to know O'Donnell, have for 40 years,
Yeah.
and he's done an outstanding job at that registry. He's really mechanized the whole thing and brought it up to date.
Yeah.
I would definitely then go for what he advocates, which is the new position. I didn't know that, Walter.
Yeah,
Yeah. That is the case.
Okay?
so at any rate, the question in front of us is the board comfortable in signing this letter? And John expressed his feeling that he would. I have expressed mine, and you gentlemen need to consider whether you would sign it or not. So,
I thought we talked about it before, actually.
well, we did, but
We didn't have the letter at that point.
You did talk about it, we just, now you have the whole.
Do we have a copy of it in the packet too, or no?
last
Page.
Last page,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah,
yeah, so,
Opinion hasn't changed. I would support it.
Chad,
Yep.
you in favor of it?
Yes, I would favor it. I don't have a problem using contractors. I've used them as well at work, but you need to have somebody in-house that can speak the talk and so that they are an employee
Right.
of the registry,
Yep.
and you got a go-to person.
Yeah.
And they're the expert in their field and the liaison to the consultant.
And they tell them what they want, they write the specs, that's right, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
I agree. There's certain nuances that only a person on the ground can understand.
All right.
Consultancy's good,
Yeah.
just to have
Yep.
somebody else. That way you don't have that single point of failure, but
okay, good. Well, then, at the end of the meeting, we'll get a chance to sign the letter, and Betsy can forward it for us.
I have a copy here.
Okay, so thank you very much. Now, we've passed 7:15, so we can bring up 262 Dedham Street. Special permit for PMLD Plan Multi-Lot Development. And this is also a public hearing, and Chris will read that into the record, please.
notice is hereby given in accordance with Mass GL Section 40A and the Norfolk zoning bylaws, Section J4. A public hearing will be held on Tuesday, April 12, 2022, at 7:15 p.m. in Room 124 at the Norfolk Town Hall, 1 Liberty Lane, Norfolk, Mass., relative to a special permit application for property located at 262 Dedham Street in Norfolk, Mass. The applicant, Norfolk Dedham Street LLC of Norfolk, Mass., is seeking a special permit in accordance with Section J4A1 for planning multi-lot development for the proposed commercial redevelopment. The proposed development will take place on 2 existing lots, which shall be combined into 1 lot with common utilities, drainage, and infrastructure. The property is located in the C-1/C-1B zoning districts. Reference Assessors Map 18, Block 69, Lots 18 and 43. The application and plans are available for public inspection on the Town of Norfolk website, norfolk.ma.us/boards-committees/planning-board, or in the office of the Norfolk Planning Board during the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Thursday.
Thank you, Chris. All right, Rich, why don't you introduce us to this topic, and then
Sure.
we'll...
so in terms of the project team, you'll have a combination, you'll have some people in the room, and then you'll have some remote with you this evening. We also have Phil Paradis, who does the peer reviews for the planning board. He's there
Yep.
on remote with you.
Yep,
In terms of where we're at relative to the project, I think from my discussions earlier today with Phil, I think we're pretty much at the finish point with with all the civil related issues. Did some test holes earlier this week. He just needs to do a little bit more just canvassing to make sure everything is addressed, and then formulate some potential conditions in terms of when the board is ready to entertain potentially approving the project. And then tonight, we're going to go through, one of the things we talked about, Mr. Chairman, is going through the design review memorandum that was provided to the board earlier on some of the design elements.
Is that attached?
It's, we'll display that. I don't think it's in the printout. We'll put it on the screen to go through. And then you'll hear from the architect, and they have someone on the team who will talk about the issue of noise that's been brought up in terms of the proposed use as well. And I think we'll probably Unless there's a particular interest on civil, we might just,
Well, yeah, hang on a second. We do have a copy of the Phil's letter of March 18th, which Phil is now pulling out of his records, I'm sure. And the question I have for Phil is, there's a whole bunch of issue resolved situations here. I haven't had a chance tonight to go through all these. Are there any open issues here? Looks like most of them have been resolved, but are there any open issues from an engineering review point of view, Phil, that you feel ought to be addressed to the board tonight?
So, as this meeting, as the last plan set was submitted, we had kind of two major issues with the stormwater. One was the not enough testing was done, and so we requested some tests be done, and that would be SW 11, 12, and 14. So I received a plan today with a couple plans, one with the logs, the soil test logs, and then some elevations for high groundwater. So it appears as though the systems as designed would be accommodated by the soils. There are two situations where the project will need to import additional gravel, clean gravel. There is an existing infiltration leach field under one of the basins, and one of the other systems is in the location of an existing building. So obviously those will have to be removed, and clean fill will be installed. So I think we're going to need a condition that, a normal condition that someone from the town would observe the excavation of the infiltration system prior to installing the system. Is a typical condition. We'd also want to know the consistency of the soils brought in to fill in around where the system is. So we probably need a sieve analysis of that material. So. And then the second one involves the stormwater pollution prevention plan, the SWIP plan. There's probably three comments related to that. That would be comments 19, 21, and 22. The applicant. So we recommend that our standard condition that the final signed stormwater pollution prevention plan be provided prior to construction. It would need to include what's in comment 21 and 22. So I don't see that as a big thing. And then the front issues are primarily zoning and/or site development issues, which we mostly defer to you for your input. We don't have an opinion one way or the other. It's more of a preference of the board.
and so one of
So
the
that's about it.
zoning, just to take from that point, though, one of the zoning issues was the PMLD that's before you tonight.
Yeah.
To allow for the impervious coverage that you need to make the project work in terms of,
Okay, thank you, Phil. Thank you, Rich.
sure.
All right, so Rich, you were about to say something before I got Phil going here.
So one thing we did talk about was the sign. So the sign will be taken care of afterwards. So we're not, they'll get back to the sign, just because if you remember previously, we talked about the sign. They are going to use the existing sign, but that's not part of, that'll be a separate permit. In terms of when the,
request seems pretty standard,
Yeah,
everything we've allowed before.
yeah.
we will talk about as we get into the design review comments. I'll just say now in terms of, so the parking that they're showing you on the site plan is compliant with the zoning bylaw, so, in terms of parking spaces, they're compliant with them.
They're above and beyond, apparently.
What's that?
They're above and beyond, according to the report. They're at 107, and Beta says we only need 103 there.
I think 107 is what's required. I think they're showing,
So the challenge with the count is.
There's nothing is defined for shooting range, so you went by spaces per lane.
Yeah, I think one of the other things was that the number was rounded down instead of rounded up. It's just one space, so, but
Yeah.
it's not like you said, it's whatever.
in terms of parking to make a
I can speak to
measurable
that
difference.
briefly.
What's that? I'm sorry.
This is Rich from Field Engineering. I could speak to that briefly. The parking spaces, yeah, we have calculated 102 spaces required, like Phil said. One of the areas we rounded, it was a half a space needed, and we had conservatively taken the square footage for the training room on the second floor, which doesn't really have seats associated with it, to calculate a number of spaces in that associated with that area, which would get us the 102, which is what's needed. The 107 on the plans includes the handicap spaces, which you can't count towards your total. So the 107 is the number of spaces on the plan.
Thank you. That's a little more detailed to get to that number. Makes the point. And then the second matter, which is part of the special permit request, is parking in the front yard. As you know, this is, it is a corner lot, so it is kind of unique. It has under the two front yards, so it's pretty hard to, not park in the front yard. So, but anyway, I think that kind of covers it in terms of that aspect of it.
There's the walkway as well, so they want to do a payment in lieu.
So at the last public hearing, I think the sense for the board was to put the sidewalk in, so that'll. be
As
part
of
the
this
pro-
report, though, it says they're still looking for contribution to the town of Norwalk, to the Norfolk Sidewalk Fund.
I think if you recall, I think the planning board, you had, might remember.
That was our request, yeah, I remember that, but not reflected in what we're looking at now. So that
No,
means the drawings aren't reflective of that.
no, they'll have to make that adjustment, yes.
Where's the closest sidewalk to this corner lot? Is it past the Eagle Brook, the closest sidewalk?
Yeah, it's the Eagle Brook.
It goes to Eagle Brook, yeah.
Eagle Brook has a parking lot in front of it? I mean, a sidewalk?
So there is not a sidewalk in front of Eagle Brook right now.
No.
It's down at,
By the gas station?
by the gas station.
The new project.
But again, you kind of piece this together, you get there, right? So
Yeah,
if
agreed.
you wait for all of it,
No,
you get none of
agreed.
it, so.
Yeah,
I would like to see the sidewalk that connected right to the existing one.
So it will be, the sidewalk there's a sidewalk on Shire Drive. It comes down to the corner, and then this sidewalk would go along Dedham Street to the edge of their property, to the Eagle Brook. And then over time, we get the sidewalk connected.
And I think that was also, Blair was on the call the last time we talked, or the Zoom last time, and I think that was his recommendation as well, right?
Right.
If I recall correctly.
We have a multi-million-dollar sidewalk plan that you all took a look at not too long ago, so,
We have
in terms of funding it, so,
let me just ask the applicant, we have a very expensive project here, and as far as possible mitigation for this section, right now, you're required to have a parking lot, a sidewalk in front of the building, and with connectivity in front of the Eagle Brook, we would have now parking all the way to the new project, which is the sidewalk and Sharon Ave.
There's one more lot between Eagle Brook and the gas station. There's actually two lots.
yeah, there's two
Two
lots,
lots?
yeah.
Not just
Yeah.
Eagle Brook.
So Dexter,
What's
if you can use
the
the,
undeveloped one?
How many linear feet are we talking?
It's Eagle Brook.
I'd like to see it.
so.
Yeah, me too. We'll see.
Maybe I should share my screen.
I don't think it'll happen as a result of this project, but still.
See the sidewalk, what section was that?
Sidewalk was F2. Okay. I mean F3, sorry.
Yep.
Chris, it's what the board decides.
Share my screen. Dexter, Justin.
Are you on Zoom?
I am on Zoom, just so I
Okay,
know.
yep, we can share your screen then.
While we're waiting for that, would you identify yourself, sir,
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
is the green light on the little guy? That's for the home audience.
Bait and tackle
Gonna
store.
You have mute, did you mute it, Dexter?
Is it the bait and tackle store?
Your
The other
Zoom?
side of Eaglebrook?
That's good. Works now. I did mute Zoom, yes. Good evening. I'm Dexter Preston, project architect from Daycon, and I'd like to present my screen here to show the presentation of the site plan. Here we are. See here we have the, this is the aerial view. This is the lot in question, 262 Dedham Street. Adjacent to that is the Eaglebrook Saloon.
Yep.
And then we have one other operation. I do not know the exact name of the business, but I believe it's the wood cutting
Bait shop, I still call it bait shop.
Oh, yeah, the bait shop.
bait shop. Thank you.
Shop, yeah.
And then then we actually get down to the gas station here.
Okay, yeah.
So we still have two more businesses between ours.
How many linear feet for sidewalk to connect to the gas station or to Shire? That's Sharon Ave, I guess,
Sharon,
right?
yeah.
How
Not
many
sure,
linear
Rich,
feet
if
of
you have a
sidewalk?
plan up that could take that dimension quickly for us.
It's 250 feet to the Eagle Brooks property line from the sidewalk.
Yeah,
I'd have to measure the rest of that.
is that
So this
from
is
the
250
the lot
here?
line of your lot? Not
To the
counting-
sidewalk on Shire, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, from the end of your lot through Eaglebrook to Shire is 200-something feet?
No, from the corner of his lot to Shire is 200 and some odd feet. From the corner of his lot to
250.
through Eaglebrook and the bait shop
To
down to
Sharon.
Sharon is
Yeah, but
a different number. These
400 to 500 maybe?
My point is, the
Yeah, about
frontage in front
500.
of his lot,
Yeah.
assuming that that's going to be a sidewalk, which is part of the regulations.
Yeah.
From that point to Sharon Ave, how many linear
That's
feet
what
is
he's working
that?
on, calculating
All
for
right,
you.
want to make sure I get the right one.
Yeah.
All right, give me a minute here.
Probably,
I get 420 off of Google Earth. if it's
20?
Yeah.
official.
Yeah,
it's like
that's,
400, just.
that sounds about right.
Okay, so.
It's another 420 feet or so.
Okay, all right, so there you go.
So how do you folks feel about, since you're doing a major excavation on that lot, and there's going to be a lot of traffic in this project, and right now Norfolk is filled with pieces of sidewalks here, there. It seems to me that where you're doing some major excavation on your property, it wouldn't be the same cost as the DPW coming in from scratch and running in a sidewalk. Would you folks be opposed to connecting the sidewalk so we have continuity up to Sharon Ave and the police station?
Grab a mic if you would. Again, not for us, but for the folks at home, please.
It's something that we would certainly consider if we were able to get a vote on the project tonight.
Well, that's my point, because again, you're gonna have a lot of traffic there. You're gonna have a highly visible business.
Sure.
And just the connectivity to Sharon Ave, which is where the police station is, and to the gas station, would be a super advantage for the people in town and for the folks that are going to be using your project. And like, you know, in our regulations, we talk about mitigation, things that affect the area that you're coming to development and the resources you're going to be using for our town. I'd like to have you consider putting that sidewalk in as all of the construction is going on and make that connectivity. And with that, I'm assuming that there are no takings of land that you need, that there's enough land in the right-of-way to make that happen.
I'm certainly not opposed to the sidewalk. My only question or concern, I guess, would be what would the time frame be to put the sidewalk in front of the Eaglebrook and the secondary property to get it to Sharon Avenue, where we would have connectivity for potential patrons that wanted to go to the gas station or whatnot. I mean, if we're going to put the sidewalk in, I would just hope that it would be something that would be scheduled to completion and not just an open-ended.
You know, speaking presumptuously, if you're willing to do that,
Yep.
I think if you work with our DPW director, I don't think you'll have any problem in timing if that's going to be the end result. I really don't, but Blair can speak for himself.
Yeah, I mean, 1A is obviously, it's a high rate of speed that people travel on that
Exactly.
roadway, and we don't see a lot of pedestrians. I'll tell you, in my 17 years on the property, it's not very common to see somebody walking down that roadway. You know, beyond our property, obviously, is the town line where Norfolk Power Equipment is. In front of the liquor store, there's no opportunity for a sidewalk there.
But the activity, from what you're offering,
Yep.
a shooting range, a training center with a whole bunch of seats,
Yep.
and the opportunity for these people to walk and get a soda at the gas station, I think is a lot more pronounced than somebody going to rent a piece of equipment and walking up to use the gas, or to
I
get a
understand
soda.
what you're saying. I hope to have vending machines in my facility so they don't have to leave, though.
Well, then you'd have the whole captured audience, but either way, I think if you could, at least from my point of view, I don't know how the board feels, but from my point of view, if you're willing to do that as an improvement to the area, then I would appreciate it.
If we could get a vote on our project tonight, sir, I would certainly be in favor of that.
Well, we will
Works for
see.
me.
We'll proceed, see where we are.
So other areas that I noticed in here, aside from the parking, is the non-conformance of the entryway, which is already existing, so I don't anticipate any issues with that. It's 250 feet between entrances from the next parcel, which is Eagle Brook, to this one. And that's not typically allowed, but it's an existing condition.
I think the good thing about this, Chris, he has egress on a side street. I mean,
Right.
that's enormous.
Yeah, no, I like that
think we
approach.
go to-
I wouldn't want to close off,
Yeah.
and I don't think it makes sense for us to raise that existing entrance and move it.
Right. I think, though, for just, back to the matter, is everybody will enter and exit off of the side street.
Off of Shire, for safety reasons, if
If you
nothing
leave Eagle
else.
Brook at night and you're taking the left.
Yeah. Yeah. So that one was J1. The next one would be J3, which is the impervious lot coverage that we discussed. Provided coverage is approximately 64% in the C-1 district, 67% in the C-1B district. That's into the maximum 16% coverage for the C-1 and C-1B districts. And that's where the PMLD comes in, because then that would increase the lot coverage to 70%.
Correct.
Did you want to, you want to transition to noise at this point?
No, let's just, there's a couple of more.
Couple more through here? Okay,
J4, I mean, it's a small thing, but can we talk about where that is on the site? J4, it says, landscape plan, blah, blah, blah. In accordance with this section, an outdoor facility for the storage of equipment must be screened by a solid fence. And apparently it's proposed to have shrubs, so can you point that out to us and let us take a look at what you're talking about there?
You can pull the site plan up. That's the transformer pad along the, adjacent to the entrance of Shire Drive, off of Shire Drive. That's the equipment storage, I guess, that we're talking about here. We had revised the site plan to include a row of screening evergreens along that side that would block the view of the transformer pad.
And point to the transformer pad? Right there in the corner, yeah, okay. Right by the entrance. Gotcha, okay, thank
Yes.
you. I think that's all right. I wouldn't push.
The industrial park.
Yeah, I wouldn't
fine.
push to have a fence around that at this point.
No.
Okay,
I mean,
I'm not quite, it's good they're screening it. I'm not quite sure that's really applicable to that use, the transformer pad. That section's really
Yeah, I agree.
outdoor storage.
It's not,
yeah.
Not,
it's not really outdoor storage.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
no.
Yep.
So I
It's a
wouldn't,
utility.
yeah, it's a utility, so I wouldn't, I mean, appreciate the screening, but I'm not sure that's really
Necessary.
necessary for that. But nevertheless, they are doing it, which is a positive, so. But,
That also addresses the softening of the view of the back half of the building from Shire
Oh, it
that
does.
we had discussed a bit with the design review board,
yep.
that
no,
row of
definitely-
shrubbery there.
Agree, it definitely does that. Just in terms of, complying with the zoning bylaw, I don't think it's applicable for that piece.
Correct.
We talked about the,
How about this page 8 here, T1? How does the board feel about the increase in traffic that's going to occur due to the business?
What, as far as a traffic study?
Yeah,
I don't know if we've ever done a traffic study in any commercial area in Route 1A.
well, we've got, according to the applicants here, they're expecting a pretty good clientele and a lot of folks. Do you have any projections on numbers of
We did include the projected traffic count in our submittal, and compared it to the existing use on site. Total trips per day for the build out of the existing retail use was around 400 trips per day, and with our build out's about 850-ish, which is well below the number of average trips along 1A based on the latest traffic counts that I believe that Serpid, one of the planning agencies, has done, or through Mass DOT. And we just felt that didn't warrant any, additional study based on the numbers that are seen on that road and the nominal increase. I mean, if we were going to 1,000, 2,000 trips a day or something, it might be a little more of a concern. But this is an existing lot that's been previously developed on an industrial roadway.
I mean,
well, and I think that the trip characteristics of this type of use aren't like, not the PM peaks or AM peaks, and
only if they're doing an
Correct.
event or like a what do you call it, a show or some sort of competition, right? And if you were doing something like that, I'm sure you'd arrange like a police detail and direct traffic out of Shire onto 1A.
I think since I've been on the board, 9 years, we had one done, and that was on Lawrence Street. And normally in a residential subdivision, unless you have more than 50 houses, a traffic study isn't required. And the thing with them, they're somewhat arbitrary, but they're very expensive, and they take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
It's 1A.
Yeah.
State highway, right.
I'm fine with foregoing the traffic study.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Anything else that comes to mind?
Safer
as
too
you-
than putting in that sidewalk.
That's why we talked about the sidewalk first. That's right.
All right.
is there, let's see.
But Peter covered it pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. So let's move on, Rich, to the noise or sound issue.
You want to do that first, or go to the design review and then go to noise?
All right, let's do the design review. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The design review board has reviewed this set of plans and come up with a list of points that we ought to bring to the board's attention and talk about. So would you put that up there, Betsy, please? I presume you've seen this list?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. You probably the one who presented to the design review board, right?
Do we have those or no?
We don't have.
No,
that.
not in
we
the
don't
packet.
have
We'll
that.
display them.
Not in the packet.
Just blow it up.
We're trying to display them.
Just blow it up, that's all.
Just blow it up. Blow it up?
So I can read it, yeah.
Well, hold on, John.
Trying to get over to the screen and display it.
Can we just talk about what their suggestions are? Yeah, just talk about their suggestions.
Make the screen as small as you can before you drag it over.
The screen, you don't know? The second one?
The window. Yeah, see. Now double click on the blue.
There you go.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right.
So I believe we had the specific comments down below
Yeah.
regarding the aesthetics and
Scroll up a
material
little.
choices.
Scroll down a little bit, yeah. Okay, so here we go, parking, right? That's the first one.
I believe we've discussed parking already tonight regarding the front parking up front and the distance off of Shire. There was concern about the pulling the building closer to Shire Ave. However, pulling the building closer to Shire Ave prevents a distance of sidewalk space between the building and the driveway, the required drive width, and then the required turning radius to actually exit out onto Shire. So pushing the building back any further, we are limited by the setback line on the adjacent lot. That was a pretty easy one to resolve.
Okay, now, was that information available to them when they made that comment?
It would have the dimensions weren't on the site plan to show those required distances and to look at how the truck, because where we have the trash enclosure
Yeah.
at the north corner, a truck has to make the turn and back up to the trash enclosure and out. So based on turning radiuses, the ingress egress point, and then the widths of the drives, that's what dictated our minimum setback. We could probably pull it a foot or two, but based on the positioning of the building, it seemed like it was
Okay.
value was not added.
Yeah, because for the record, these comments were generated February 1st, which was well before they had actually got to you, in terms of, the
Correct.
public
Because
hearing.
I think their setting was outstanding.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, next one, rear of building, applicant, alternative.
This comment pertained to the material choice of an eaves facade, which is an extruded polystyrene with I'm sure maybe you're familiar with the eaves material.
Is that the one they decided to use on the fire department?
I am not familiar with the fire department.
It's relatively new product.
It has come a long way, but it is a very historic product. A lot of changes have been made in the last few decades for the material used. It had been around since the 70s. I was going to say 80s, but then I'm born in the 80s, so it's been around since the 70s. So, but it has come a long way. And the product now, we've chosen that material only because we have such a large expanse of facade, and we want to be able to articulate something with reveals and designs. The overall assembly for the shooting range themselves is really going to be driven by our acoustics. We are concerned that the design board review suggested having true masonry on the facade of the building. Our envelope design is going to be dictated by how we want to meet our acoustical standards for this project. And the mass equation of how we actually define our envelope is going to be critical to that. So while we are open to it, we really believe the eaves facade on the exterior for our insulation, continuous exterior insulation plan is going to be much more beneficial to our overall acoustical ratings as well as our design alternatives for the project. It is the back of house space. It is screened from Shire Ave. We are using other more modern materials in the front of the building and the elevation. Yes, and the most important thing is meeting energy code.
I think it's fine myself.
Yeah. All right, let's hit the next one, landscaping.
More considerations to planting trees. This is, I believe, just has been implemented from adding our hedgerow along the parking around the entire frontier facades frontage of Shire as well as Dedham Street. We've also changed the landscaping for some of the tree selections based on foliage and other considerations. We've actually done quite a bit to the landscape plan since first presented in February. We've added additional buffers on the northeast between Eaglebrook and our property in order to screen from the parking lot and drive routes. So we've done quite a bit for the landscaping since that meeting.
Yep.
We've also
Lighting, okay, photometric plan, resolution,
the photometric plan has been redone in order to show the adjacent properties, which was the direct request. Make sure we don't show any spillage. This was in the beta comments as well, so it was a spillover from the two different teams. The photometric plan has a legend that has all the fixture cuts showing their properties and values.
Has Beta had a chance to look at that?
It was resubmitted with the comments,
Okay.
with the review return, yes.
Okay.
I believe those were the other design board review comments, I think, spilled over into some of the other ones that we addressed tonight regarding the sidewalk and others, so, and the signage as well.
That's it.
That's it? Okay, all right, thank you. All right, let's get to the main topic, which is acoustics.
Excellent.
As you know, one of your neighbors, or the neighbors are not yours, but the neighbors of these gentlemen down there is a veterinary, and has submitted a letter, which I think has been transmitted to you fellas. And we're very interested to understand how you intend to address that issue.
Excellent. Thank you, Chairman. Tonight, we've brought ourselves, and we have a prepared presentation and discussion regarding the acoustics in the letter and comment in question. We want to start off with addressing the comment directly in the letter directly. I'm not sure if you want to share my screen so we can bring up the letter, or if the letter should be presented.
Can I just ask you a quick question before you start?
Sure.
Do you meet with the decibel requirements under state law for noise?
Yes, we've exceed them.
You do? You exceed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You can go on now.
Great. It's a major point of this discussion, so that's a good way to start.
Exactly.
Let's see if I can share my screen. So we want to start off just by addressing the letter directly, knowing that there was a concern about acoustics. Obviously, with the shooting facility, we want to make sure we're addressing the concerns of our neighbors and abutters in the most beneficial way possible to the town. The concern was regarding animals in question, which is obviously a very sensitive topic, has a lot of emotion, especially animals in distress. So we can appreciate the concern and really want to make sure we address this in a thoughtful manner, that we are not jeopardizing their recovery or the impacts of these animals. We'd like to start off by acknowledging there will be noise. That is something that we have to address out there. Of course, there will be some noise. The level of noise is something we want to talk to the science to. We do have our acoustic engineer on the phone tonight. We'll talk to some of the specifics of the report and analysis that has been done on the site to date. And that's really where we want to focus in our attention, is around the existing conditions of the site. Let's see here. Some of my other items I wanted to cover was the unpredictability of the sound in the area. We will be adding to the din of the general environment. Of course, again, that has to meet certain code levels. And as long as we are meeting or exceeding those requirements, we want to make sure we're addressing those and we're keeping to a standard. It is difficult to design to a code of an unpredictable nature, and that is the emotional impacts of animals within a veterinary hospital. We want to make sure we keep the discussion to, while we are designing in a thoughtful manner, we also presenting a case that we are meeting and exceeding the codes that are dictated for the town. So to that point, I want to make sure, I'd like to pass it over to our acoustical engineer, who has developed the site analysis and completed the site report for this project in order to show how we are addressing the stated codes. Can I pass it off to Doug Bell? Over there.
My name is Doug Bell. I'm a senior principal consultant at Kavanaugh Tachi Associates. Kavanaugh Tachi Associates is located in Sudbury, Massachusetts. Has been in business as a consulting firm since 1975. When we are looking at this site and this project, there, there's a number of things that we will be considering and addressing in it. But I think that the first is just to make sure that we have an understanding of the regulations that apply to noise produced by a facility such as this, or any industrial or commercial facility. In this case, there's two specific noise regulations that apply. The first being that addresses the state of Massachusetts noise policy, which is been, is essentially a regulation that is based on incremental changes in noise levels. The sense is that people's reaction and environmental reactions to noise are associated most effectively with changes in the environment from new noise sources. As such, the policy that approaches it by saying that you're not allowed to increase the sound level in the environment by more than a 10 decibel increase. So what that implies is that you need to go out first and measure what's already there. And to that end, we have done a survey, a week-long sound survey at this site at two locations. Perhaps, Dexter, you can move to the figure 2 in our report, I believe, or figure 1, yeah. Zoom in on that. And you'll see there's two thumbtacks, S11 and S12. This is where we located our sound level monitors. These were devices that are battery operated. They sat there and gathered data for a week-long period at each location. The S12 location was selected really to sort of document and record the background sounds associated with the predominant source of noise in this environment, which is the traffic on 1A. S11, you'll notice, is much farther distant from Route 1A, and it was really placed in that location to give a better sense of what is the acoustic environment for those residences that are on, and I believe it's Sharon Drive, where if you want to indicate that with your marker, yeah, right there, right where that hand is so that again, what we're trying to do is get farther away from the noise source. And now let's switch to the data set, Dexter, and just look at the top one there. Let's just look at this top figure. What we have here is the sound levels that were measured over the course of the 7-day measurement period. There's 3 different sets of data there. The red one is the most important one here, which is known as without getting too technical, it's the L90 background sound level, but it represents the quietest 6 minutes, the quietest 6 minutes of each hour recorded. And if you follow that, you can see pretty clearly as the traffic or the sound levels in the area. And we've flagged out a lot of data here because we're only showing the data that is representative of the operating hours of the shooting range. But what you'll notice is that pretty much on a very regular basis, around 6 or 7 o'clock at night, that the sound levels start to drop, and that makes sense as the traffic is waning. And so what we've decided to do is to set as our acoustic design goal is to take those lowest levels that were recorded, which occur about 9 o'clock at night, and use those as the basis of design. And you'll see that they typically go down to about 35 decibels, 33 decibels in one case. I should point out is the data on Thursday, November 25th was not used. That actually was Thanksgiving Day and represents sort of an anomalous data point. So, but by using all of the data that we have here, we determined that really the lowest it gets out there, even during the operating hours of this facility at the locations that are furthest from the highway, is around 35 decibels. That would suggest then that an appropriate limit based upon the state noise policy would be 45 decibels. Now, this 45 decibels needs to be applied at some location, and the state's pretty clear on that their regulation is designed to present residential properties. Although they can look at it at property lines, they tend to disregard the sound levels at property lines where
here in Ukraine, it is a rush to evacuate civilians from the eastern part of the country.
mute. Thank you.
Are we okay there still? So anyway, these generally are not applied at commercial property lines, but at what would be the first sensitive receptors, which would, again, in this case for this project, would be the property lines as were indicated at 5 Sharon Drive, which is about 300 feet distant from the site. So the background or the sound level limit associated with the state noise policy would be 45 decibels. And you'll notice that for the most part, when the facility is operating, the background sound is already above 45 or very near it. As such, it's likely that the gunshot noise would be either very lightly audible or not audible at all. During the very quietest hours, hour at 9 o'clock at night, there might be a indication that the sound from the gunshot might be above the background, which would make it perceptible. Nobody wants to oversell the fact that this won't produce noise. It just will produce noise at a liminal level that certainly would be consistent with the existing environment. Certainly, again, associated with quieter than a loud car going by on the street, or a truck that's accelerating on 1A would certainly produce louder and higher sound levels than that 45 dB that we've defined as a limit for this project. Let's go back then to the regulations section, and I want to point out one other thing. We can stay right there exactly on page 2. The city or town of Norfolk does have a noise ordinance. We examined this noise ordinance very carefully, and what you'll see here is that the noise ordinance has various sound level limits that are associated with various discrete frequency bands. So that you can produce a certain sound level at very, very low frequencies, and then these levels change with the frequencies. Unfortunately, and this is unfortunate, is that the frequency bands that have been established by this regulation became obsolete in the early to mid 60s, nearly 50 years ago. As such, there's no instrumentation available to, one, measure to this standard, that unless you would go to a museum, I would guess, or that
So you're saying we need to update our noise ordinance?
Add that to the
I'm sorry?
So you're saying we need to update our noise ordinance?
You would need to update your ordinance for us to say that to the strictest level we can comply to it. However, I would like to tell you a few things about this. I can take the data within those numbers and extrapolate a sound level limit that appears that would follow the intent of the ordinance. And what that would suggest is that your noise ordinance, as it's written today, would require a sound level limit of 50 decibels during the daytime hours, which are coincident with the operating hours of the shooting gallery. And as I said already, based on the state noise regulation, we have determined a limit of 45 would be applicable there. So to some extent, your noise ordinance isn't as protective anyway as the state one. And so the state, I think, noise ordinance drives the acoustic design for the facility. So bottom line is that to comply with the state noise policy, this project does need to be designed to meet 45 decibels at the property lines of the nearest neighbors or residential properties. And to say the least, that's going to take a significant effort on the part of the facility to meet these goals in terms of the design. And we can talk a little bit about that in a few moments. My point, though, that I would like to say is that meeting the state noise ordinance is a very protective policy. 45 decibels. To put that in perspective, is if I'm talking to you and standing maybe 3 feet away from you, the sound level is about 65 decibels. If I were to talk at a normal voice and you would step back 30 to 40 feet, then you would hear me as if I was about 45 decibels. So you potentially could audibilize that. You'd still hear it. But if we take that and put that in the presence of a background that's already 45, it might become somewhat indistinguishable. So that's the first step that I wanted to point out here, is that the design goals for this facility are going to be to mitigate gunshot noises, and nobody's denying that they are themselves that they are very loud. They are. They're very high levels. However, we have experience with facilities and gun ranges, and we do know how to mitigate this sound. Essentially, the design of the building, and I think this came up early in the discussion, will involve a large amounts of concrete mass that stops sound from going through it. And to think of it even more specifically, this will be essentially a building within a building. There'll be the gun range areas will be within their own concrete bunkers that will be then surrounded by another set of concrete surfaces to further mitigate the sound. So the sound not only has to propagate through one concrete wall, but through a second one. I want to point this out because there was some discussion in the letter that was presented about a gun range in Attleboro. And although I've not been to that gun range, I have looked at it through aerial photographs, and you can see that this was not a building that was designed to be mitigating sound. The roof of the building is just a metal roof. So although there may be concrete or masonry walls in the gun spaces, there's essentially a very lightweight, roofing system that has very little acoustic properties. So sound doesn't just travel up through the roof. Once it comes out through the roof, it propagates in all directions. And so I can quite understand why someone standing near this other facility could quite significantly audibilize the sounds from that gun range. It doesn't appear to have been designed and may not have necessary to be designed for such great acoustic requirements as is this site, where the proximity to sensitive receptors, residential properties at 300 feet away. So that, I think, is an important thing to understand. But the design of the building itself is still underway. We have not had a chance to completely model and create estimates of the sound impacts off-site, but we've worked with the team through the schematic design to assure that there's a very thorough understanding of the acoustic details and properties that are going to be required to make this project comply with the state noise requirements. How does that compare? Again, I think it was important for Dexter to point out is none of us are experts on animals and how they react to noises. There are other transient sounds that these animals would certainly be exposed to. Perhaps their own barking or barking of a dog next to them that might be 80, 90, 100 decibels level compared to the 45 that this facility would produce. To me, it appears that based on the analysis of the data, the sounds that are being created by this facility will be consistent with the current acoustic environment.
Just for the record, our planner has just recorded your conversation at 65 to 70 decibels.
I hope he wasn't using a cell phone to do that.
He was.
It makes my equipment, well, anyway. No,
Don't worry, it's not calibrated. Mr. Bell, out of curiosity, can you just state for the audience your credentials that make you an acoustician, and for my curiosity?
Okay, so my background is in electrical engineering. I've been an acoustical consultant since 1987 at Kavanaugh Tachi Associates. I've been a principal consultant there since that time, so nearly 35 years in the business of acoustics.
And can we speak a little bit about the equipment you use to measure? I noticed you were using SPL meters, A-weighted rating. Can you talk a little bit about the sensitivity of those microphones and whether they were omnidirectional, cardioid?
So all instrumentation quality equipment is omnidirectional, which is itself different than the cell phone that you were measuring with, perhaps. But they are omnidirectional, which means they measure sound equally in all directions. The equipment that we use is considered meets standards for acoustic instrumentation to the highest level of precision. It's considered Type 1 instrumentation. and I can't quote the exact standard numbers, but there's both an international standard, an ISO, and an American national ANSI standard. This equipment meets those standards.
And so if requested, we could get the sensitivity from you of that equipment.
Okay, so the sensitivity, the sensitivity of this equipment can measure into the low 15 decibel range. The lower limit's about 15 decibels, which is more contrary to where the lowest levels you might measure again with the cell phone, because of the small microphone and the noise floor in the system might be around 40, 42, something like that. But no, we don't. The data that we gathered, the sound levels in that environment never dropped even close to the lower limits of our equipment.
No.
And the equipment upper range is in the 140 decibel range. Again, we're nowhere near that in terms of the outsides, though that becomes somewhat moot in that our data analysis and our survey work is most focused on what are the quietest levels out there, as that's the most critical basis of comparison.
And then that equipment, how often do you calibrate it? And you utilize a third party for that, correct?
We use a third party to calibrate both the instrument and we do two types of calibration. We have the instruments calibrated every 2 years at a laboratory to check that their electronics meet standards. But we also use what's called an acoustic calibrator, so that every time we deploy the instrument, we put a device over the microphone that has a known sound level, and we adjust to that. Though there's very little adjustments ever performed, as the instrumentation that we have doesn't drift much and is not affected by temperature or other things that might affect other equipment.
Okay.
But and those calibrators we calibrate on a more regular basis, once a year, as they're used and deployed with the equipment.
Perfect, thank you. Last couple questions. What's the largest allowed caliber that we're expecting at the range?
I'd prefer that the proponent would tell you that. I'm not sure what at this point, we're still working on, we don't have the full details.
To be determined what we're going to allow people to shoot. The bullet trap itself that receives the lead is rated up to 50 BMG.
Okay, and so that's what you're doing the acoustical analysis against then?
That would be the basis of design, would be that the loudest sound level that would occur in the ranges would be that level, yes.
Okay, and then are we talking semi or fully, or is there any restriction?
Not allowed.
Fully is not allowed, but semi, right?
Yeah.
No.
Fully is not allowed.
Right, fully is not allowed, but semi is, so you're doing analysis for burst versus single?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Once you go to semi, the shot, the individual shots, it doesn't matter what the rate is then. It's the individual shots that you'll be looking at.
Okay.
On your data chart, can you describe for the board the left-hand scale, the vertical scale? Is that a linear scale, or is that some other, is acoustics measured in some other fashion, such as logarithmic?
It is a logarithmic scale. The sound level itself, sound levels are measured in a logarithmic scale. That's what a decibel is. In this case, the definition is 20 times the log of a sound pressure level over a standardized sound pressure level. So, and that tends to follow how human hearing reacts as well. That we do changes in level are most best described perceptually in a logarithmic format. To put that in, just to give you some sense of that as well, is that typically the human ear, an untrained human ear, cannot distinguish the differences of sound levels that are within 3 decibels of each other. When it's a 5 decibel change, then it might be noticeable, and when there's a 10 decibel change, it might be described as a doubling of sound.
What discrimination do animals have in that regard?
I'm not an expert on animal hearing at all. I have I couldn't answer that question. I'm sorry.
We have someone in the audience who...
Don't we finish first?
Betsy, we also have people in the lobby who might be waiting. Somebody texted me.
Oh, okay.
We have people in the lobby? Okay.
I'm not able to let them in.
Yeah, everyone's been admitted.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, what's the consensus of the board? Should we let the lady speak now, or should we finish these gentlemen and then let her speak?
If I can just finish one last statement, just so we can summarize some of the
Finish it.
points that we've
We'll
made.
get to you, believe me.
Yeah, I just want to summarize, and then I'll hand it off. I want to take a minute. So we've defined the standards which we're applying to, the analysis that's been conducted. We've discussed from a context point of view, the operations, the building design, the business hours, and the limitations on ammunition type for acoustics. We've also wanted to talk about the existing noise creators, context, being the State 1A highway, being only 350 feet away, 24-hour use. The bait shop, which has wood cutting, which is another business. Eagle Brook Saloon, which is open till 11 p.m., also a noise generator, direct to butter. The police station, which has a shared access road and, of course, has sirens going on Route 1A, as well as the gas station, which is also adjacent use, which is 200 feet away from the site in question. So there are quite other, just from a context point, other unrestricted noise potentials within the immediate context. Also, we wanted to talk to the fact that the North Attleboro facility that was presented isn't necessarily a good precedent, as the facility's construction type isn't known, and we don't know what standards it was constructed to. Finally, in conclusion, we admit that we understand there will, of course, be noise generated. We have a set of design goals that have been created. We will have to be, meeting the design goals for the town as well as exceeding those, knowing that we'll be using a new set of criteria, a new standard. We will hold ourselves, obviously, accountable for the higher standard. We understand that the noise generated by our facility will be somewhat of an unpredictable environment. However, it is a known pop. We know what the sound will be, and we know what the level maximum that can be allowed is. There will obviously be an analysis of our building design to show that it is complying with the standard in the next phase of our design. So in conclusion, we are requesting approval that we do show evidence that we are meeting the stated design goals upon obtaining building permit. And then with that, I guess that summarizes things, and I'll open it up.
Questions from board members before we get to the audience?
Mr. Bell, if you could just describe the inverse square law and its relation to sound with regards to the distance to the facility we're speaking of.
So the inverse square law says that essentially that as you get farther away from the source of sound, it gets quieter, and it does so with the square of the distance, meaning if you double the distance, the sound level, the sound pressure reduces by a factor of 4, 2 squared. In a logarithmic sense, it gets even more complicated, but there's a very simple rule of thumb that we use in acoustics, which is that if you double the distance then from a source, then it would reduce by 6 decibels. So if we have a sound level of 50 decibels and we're 50 feet away from it, when we move back to 100 feet away from it, it would be 50 minus 6, or 44 decibels.
Thank you.
And Doug, to add on to that, can you state the requirements of the decibel level that's not allowed to leave the limits of our site?
The decibel, that's going to get involved with the size and the design of the building as to what one might measure right at the face of the building. That hasn't yet been determined. What we will be designing to is reaching a maximum sound level at the property lines of these residential receptors of 45 decibels or lower. So that, again, if you're...
Thank you.
And that was one way of looking at it might be as if you're 300 feet from the building and you move to within 150 feet of the building, then the sound level would be potentially 50 decibels, 51 decibels. You get closer and closer. That requires that we're looking at sound level reductions on the order of 80 decibels between the interior of the building to the exterior. That's both achievable but requires a significant acoustic design and acoustic details to make sure that can be achieved.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Gary?
Yeah, just quickly. You make assumptions when you're conducting your tests because you don't have the actual building in place. So you put sensors at the road and you put sensors at the back of the property. So isn't it an assumption the sensor or the decibel level you got at the back of the property might be different if you had the actual building in place?
Well, that would be correct if we put the microphone later down the road behind the back of the building. But my interest here was, and can we go back to the figure that shows the site? It was to find a location, that S11 location, that was most representative of those homes that are just to the north of that.
Okay.
And you'll see what you want to have is line of sight or no interference between the road, the main source of noise, as they do. I mean, again, to simulate that. So I feel that the data, the S11 point is, and again, it's somewhat irrelevant what happens after the building is put in place because the property line behind it is a commercial building and would not likely be affected by sound from this facility. The spaces that we're most interested in are the most sensitive would be these residential properties where you can see the roofs of the buildings in this aerial photograph.
All right. You only lost me a little bit on that. Because I would have thought that once the building is there, you would be getting better data than you are getting now. You're saying that's incorrect?
That's incorrect in that right now what I'm interested in is trying to represent what's this background sound level today at that home where the hand is on the cursor right now. If you want to just move that around a little, Dexter, that would be great. Right there.
So understand.
So that's the baseline, yeah.
And then they have.
As you see, there's no building really, no large building between it and Route 1A either. And so that, would be, again, if I were to put my microphone behind a big tall building, I might find levels that are lower than are really representative of what that environment was.
Okay. And I guess another comment might be with regard to the question that came up was with regard to dogs. And I don't think it's just a specific decibel level. I'll be a devil's advocate just for a minute because I think there's, regardless of how loud a barking dog might be in an adjacent cage, the problem that dogs have is with guns, is with thunder, is with fireworks, because it's in a repetitive pattern or it isn't continuous. So it's a burst similar to gunfire or the sounds that might be coming from the range. And perhaps a better solution might be to just have a constant sound that's blocking out bursts that simulate thunder, that simulate fireworks. I don't know how you would do that. I'm just saying hitting a peak level or keeping it below a peak level isn't necessarily a solution for animals because they're not responding to a continuous level. That's not what's bothering them. The reason they called one of the solutions a thunder shirt or a thunder vest is because it's thunder that you're trying to solve, not a high noise level.
I think that we have to recognize this. We're not talking about sound levels that are even comparable to the crack of thunder or with even the character of it, the low, deep bass rumbling sound from that. These are going to be crack, crack, crack type sounds that would be of lower than someone snapping their fingers a few feet from the dog.
Okay.
I don't know again whether that is how and what these effects would be, other than to try to describe it in that context, as opposed to the more dramatic descriptions of thunder and fireworks, which this is not in that category.
Okay. And the highest level, the level that you target to attenuate the internal noise, whatever is leaving the facility, isn't above 45 decibels?
It would be less than 45 decibels at the property line of the receptor, which means if you walk farther away, it'll get even lower than that.
Okay.
But at the nearest receptor, which is, as we believe to be similar, the property line is just on the other side of the saloon's parking lot.
Good.
So are you planning on doing a noise study after the building's complete? I know you're gonna design to all this, but then you'll do a noise study upon completion of the building. And if the noise levels are not adequate, what's the backup plan? Or is that not even thought about at this time?
I've not been contracted at this point to do that, no. But it is commonly done. There is post-construction testing done regularly. Mitigation options at this point would be potentially to include that if it was necessary, and I've not had to do this in my work, but there would be potentially two different options that might be available. One is if you look at the design here of the facility or of the noise, I should go back to the sound level data that we examined on the site. Is that there's a very, very significant drop off of background sound that occurs around 6 to 7 o'clock at night. So that during the hours between 10 a.m. and 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. there's much greater masking sound available, and so that in that area you wouldn't need to meet 45, but you'd have to be under 55. But that wouldn't be that, so that there could be restriction on caliber and hours if necessary. That's not something that I foresee being needed, but that would be one option. Administrative controls. There could be potentially supplementary acoustic elements included, perhaps tall barrier walls, an additional wall along the side of the building. But again, we're not trying to solve a problem we don't have at this point. Right. The goal here is just to make sure that we design it. Our designs are, and because of the stakes of this, the stakes are high. We are going to be very conservative in the approach.
I would think that the board would include as one of its conditions in its decision a post-construction operation level sound survey to confirm the design is meeting the objectives.
Reasonable, thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to know that if we didn't meet those objectives, that there were other backup plans or mitigation that we could proceed with.
It's got to be, sure.
Yeah, normally there's a factor of safety if you're designing something, right? You're designing a bridge, you get an extra couple miles per hour of wind one day, you don't want it to fall. You didn't mention things like that again, and I know how you got to the 35 and 45 decibels, and that's not to say that 45 decibels is by any means the limitation of all the acoustics and mitigation you could throw at this. If you came up with the number of 40, you could achieve that as well. So your calculations say we have to get to 45. That's not problematic in any way for you. You have the design, you know how to do that, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
John, any further questions?
Well, the science is certainly out of my sphere of knowledge, but I boil the whole thing down to a common denominator, and that is, when you did your testing, did you comply with the methods that the state requires to come up with sound level testing? Did you?
I would look to Doug for you. Doug, you're the expert. I'm going to let you respond to that and what's on record.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. I blacked out, so I didn't know there was a question to be answered.
When you set up your testing methods and locations,
right.
Are you in compliance with the state rules requiring testing for sound levels?
The state doesn't require any testing methodology for compliance testing. They would review potentially testing data that someone performed. In this case, the testing would consist of simulating the activities that occur, potentially, multiple guns firing within the ranges and performing sound measurements at the nearest residential property line. You might leave a sound monitor out there for extended periods of time, though that data tends to be hard to work with because, one, you don't have the observed information, and also is these design goals are really to try to get to sound levels from the facility such that they're similar to what's already out there. So you really don't know what you're measuring at that point. So the ultimate testing would be done perhaps by taking measurements with a handheld measurement where you would set up and simulate activities in the gun range and
You're looking for a yes or no?
Let me go on. Thank you. You're getting over my head again. Do you have a record of any sound testing done at the Holliston facility? Because I actually was involved in that for a number of years.
I'm not even familiar with the Holliston facility.
You guys know?
I know that it's an older facility.
It's not that old. It's probably 20 years old, 15, 20. All right. I understand. So basically, to me, you comply with all the state requirements. The testing is, you're sort of on your own to come up with the requirements. So as far as this board goes, I believe we have to comply with the law. So it seems like if you're saying you complied with all the state requirements and are in those levels, then I would say that we have a hard time proving against that unless we decide to contest your testing, which I'm not in a position to do myself. I think Walter's suggestion that we go back and retesting down the road when it's up sort of is a coverall for everybody. So I think that, you're not going to build this expensive facility and not have it complete and fail the testing. So I think that the suggestion by our chairman really covers everything that is probably unknown at this time.
I think it's a good suggestion, but I'm worried about what kind of mitigations we have at that point.
Well, that would be their problem.
No, I get that. I don't understand if it would be something that would be possible at that point or not.
Oh, sure.
Why not?
Sure. There's numerous ways to mitigate sound.
But again, the mitigation, that wouldn't be on us. If they get a requirement on a special permit to comply with the future testing when it's up, they have to comply. It's not in our ballpark to decide what they have to do. And it's a big onus on them. So if I were them, I would be pretty confident that they're going to meet the testing after this building is done, personally. And again, the only reason we would have to contest it is to call for our own review of the results, which I'm not in a position to do.
So somewhere to John's point, you list all the applicable regulations in your application. And you say, this is our guidance.
Correct.
Okay. Good. I'm all for the before and after testing as well.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. But all that said, I'd like to hear from one of the abutters who is running the veterinary school, veterinary operation, not school, sorry.
Can I turn this on?
Only one school in New England is a veterinary school. That's up in Tufts, up in Grafton.
Should be on. Is green light?
Is it on?
Yep.
Okay. Kate Pillsbury. I own Cody Pet Hospital, Whispering Pines Animal Hospital Incorporated, doing business as Cody Pet Hospital. I've been there 25 years. When you pointed out the property that you thought was a residence, it's not a residence, it's a business. Sharon Avenue is, previously was residential, but where I am, it's zoned commercial. And my concern, of course, is the dogs. Dogs can be very noise phobic. When you talk about decibels, you go down to 0, and 0 decibels is where we can't hear anymore. Well, dogs can hear -15. They can hear all kinds of things that we can't. And my main concern, I appreciate what you say about the traffic and it being, you're going to go down to only 10 decibels above the traffic, which is fine. But dogs tend to be noise phobic with fireworks, thunderstorms, and gunshots. They're all associated with very dangerous things. Dogs are super smart. They hear something that they know is something they should be afraid of, they get more afraid. So my concern is that it'll sound like gunshots. And my concern is they might be able to hear it. And I do appreciate everything you've talked about, because it's settled me quite a bit. I mean, talking about the building within a building, and but those are my concerns. I own a business. It's gonna it's still gonna be there. I'm not a resident. I can't go move to another house because I don't like it. And I really appreciate what everybody's saying about testing afterwards, because a lot of times in life things are pretty simple to fix.
Do you board at your facility?
We do.
You do board, okay.
We do.
But they will not be shooting after a certain hour, so.
Yeah, but Sundays you're probably not open for business, and you might have animals boarding there.
Right.
So.
Rick, I guess it's kind of, you mentioned the gunshot. I would jump with a gunshot too. If you're outside the facility, how distinct will that gun shooting be? Will it be a muffled noise? It won't be a crackling like lightning, I'm assuming.
So Doug, I think the question that John mostly proposed, if we were at 45 decibels at our property line and her house is 250 feet away, I'm averaging based on some other calculations I did, the reduction value of 40 from 45 at 250 feet would be what?
First of all, the design is to 45 at property line, so where the receptor would be. But put that in context, it would be potentially audible, but not distinctly audible. So, as I said, it's not. This in no way is going to be are going to be to, at least again, to a human observer, a startling sound in any sense at all. It would be comparable to the stepping on a stick and having it crack and make a that type of noise, perhaps. But not, again, we're talking about sound levels that are 20 decibels below what my voice is to you right now. And 20 decibels, this is the type of levels that if you're standing next to a refrigerator might make.
And with that, there's certain properties that the trees are going to have that are going to mitigate for some of that as well, between the property line and the actual animal hospital. Is that right, Mr. Bell?
I don't want to the foliage has very little influence on acoustics, unfortunately, in that unless you have very large swaths of foliage. So typically a couple decibels for 100 feet of dense vegetation. In this case, most of what we're dealing with would be propagating across the back driveway. So we would not, in our modeling, take advantage or credit for any excess attenuation from the intervening foliage.
Okay.
If there was a fence on the back property line, a solid fence on the back property line, that would, of course, have some acoustic benefits, but the foliage in this case would be somewhat limited.
Did you say what the decibel level would be inside the building?
We're still looking, because there are means to controls to some extent through even reverberation control in the building if necessary to help reduce that. But the peak levels of gunshots are typically could be as high as 140 decibels.
Wow. Everybody walks around with headgear on anywhere in the building.
No, that would be in the proximity of the shooter. There is even attenuation down the range, even though as the sound propagates and fills the volume that it's expanding into, there would be attenuation down the range.
What's interesting, Gary, when I used to visit the place in Holliston, and I'd meet in the office, and they had a training class going on, you could hear nothing. until you opened the solid door from the range. You heard nothing. Or really
Yeah,
wouldn't
and
be
that
able
would have
to
been-
have classes or things like that.
That would have been my next question, depending on what's the sound on this exterior door, on the inside of it, and what happens when people open the doors during the course of business. But it sounds like you're enclosed, you have walls completely around any shooting range.
Correct. There is an interlocked vestibule
Right.
on every range.
I've experienced similar with
To the best of my knowledge, there would be no penetrations or doors on the north edge of the building, of the range anyway, at that,
Okay.
in the design.
Not even fire code, 75 feet between, what's the, I don't know what the distances are between exits. You got a fire in the double vestibule, what does the person do? You know, I don't know.
Well, they're only up in the one section of the building. They're not in down where the targets are, right?
Okay.
Okay, any other
Better get out.
questions to these gentlemen from the board? Anyone else in the audience care to make a comment? Betsy, yes.
Oh, I have to use this green.
That's for people at home.
Oh, I know,
It's for you at home when you're usually at home.
If the green light is on, it's on.
No, it's not.
Well, there's another one
Do it
on
on
the
the-
table.
one right there.
Oh, they always have extras.
There we
Good. Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Whitney, 26 Valley Street, Norfolk, 40 years. Walter, I worked very hard to be sure that I didn't go over 3 minutes.
Thank you.
However, I
Thank you.
think
We
I've
appreciate
added a
that.
few comments. I am a licensed gun owner, and I have been pistol shooting since 2015. So, my comments refer primarily to the building's use, though I have learned quite a bit, even though I've been there, and I wouldn't dream of opening those doors without my muffs on, and I have done it once or twice by mistake, never to forget. But the discussion of decibels and acoustics was very informative, even though I've been there. So I am here tonight, as Betsy Fajol was the first one to know, in very sincere support of the proposed project at 262 Dedham Street, of your commercial shooting range, gun shop, membership area, training facility, retail shop, and all the associated parking. I am aware that the suppression of associated noise was and is an open concern, and tonight's discussion has provided much technical information to me toward the many solutions that are available, of course, starting with concrete mass. On April 6th, after I called Betsy and said, 262 Dedham Street, I don't know how I missed that. Now, what's going on there? I could walk there. And she said, well, the proposal is a shooting range, and that got my attention. I wrote an email to Walter Byron, chairperson of the planning board, and to my surprise and delight, I've just learned that plans for this commercial shooting range have been presented to the planning board. And as I said, as a gun owner of almost 7 years, I've shot and continue to shoot several types of pistols weekly, and you have referred to the range where I shoot quite a bit tonight, the American Firearms School in North Attleboro. In viewing the video of the March 8th meeting, which I did not attend, I was very encouraged to hear of a, quote, new and exciting commercial business venture for Norfolk. I loved the next part, with the goal of removing the stigma attached to gun ownership and usage, to emphasizing the correct use of and education about firearms, and especially the all-important critical safety factor involved in gun ownership and use. Now, as an aside here, I am no audio expert. In the past 7 years, and I go weekly with my husband, I've been in the building, in the retail shop, walk down the hallways. I shoot in the rifle range. I shoot in the pistol range. I open those doors, and it's a whole different world. And to describe it as a building within a building is exactly what it is. I have a special needs 40-year-old stepdaughter who used to, even at a 4th of July parade, cover her ears out of fear of just seeing a soldier march down the street holding a rifle. She was terrified. Ashley goes with us to the shooting range because she cannot be alone. And when I'm shooting, her father and she are in the membership lounge. You can't hear a thing. In the parking lot, and I know where the people are shooting. I know where the rifle range is. I know where the pistol range is. I know where my favorite lanes are with respect to where I'm standing in the parking lot. And I know that the sound I can hear is muffled, and I know it's shooting. And then I hear trucks go by, even, pickup trucks, 10-wheelers, tractor-trailers, and they're noisier than the muffled gunshot sounds that I hear. And I know they're there. I know where they are, so I'm looking for them. Last year, and as I say, the stigma, I have had only a few people at stoplights look at my NRA stickers, a few little bumper stickers that I have, such as the way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. It's kind of how I feel. I have had women, a few women, give me the thumbs down, but when I'm at traffic lights is when people will respond to me knowing I'm a shooter by just looking at my car. Mostly, it's thumbs up, sometimes windows down. Where do you shoot, ma'am? And don't let the white hair fool you, because at the tender young age of 70, I began shooting, and I plan on continuing. Last year, I wrote a book, and this is featuring a picture of the American Firearms School. And the title, although it sounds quite frivolous, and Mark knows this book, I think I gave you one, right? Yep. Makeup on My Magnum. It was a Tuesday morning, and my husband said, B, hurry up, we're late, we gotta go. And I said, oh, geez, I fed the cats, the bunnies, I'm a little behind schedule. I'm putting my makeup on. He said, well, hurry up, I want you to get my favorite lane is either 1 or 12. And John, you said, am I armed? No, I'm not, but I have shot next to just some pretty noisy magnums in my time. So my husband said, hurry up, I want to get there. And I'll say, I know, Charlie comes in, his guns are pretty loud, so I'll wait until he's come and gone. But anyway, I grabbed my gun, I put it in the holder, and I said to myself, oh, geez, now I got makeup on my Magnum. Look what you made me do. There's my next book. But it turned into a very serious subject for me, and I know, Walter, forget the 3 minutes. I've gone beyond. I'm almost done.
I haven't done this.
You haven't done that. Bless you. Makeup on My Magnum, the true story of a 76-year-old grandmother, her Magnum, in the American Firearms School. And my goal is to help people, including women. And in my book, and Mark, I was glad that you referenced it when I did reference the two circumstances that took place in Connecticut. One was a success and the other one was a tragedy. And that's when my interest in learning how to shoot for the purpose of self-protection, if ever necessary. And I remember when a friend who did some work on the house said, Betsy, do me a favor. When you do get your license, please practice. Keep up with your skills. Don't just put it away and forget about it. So I did. And this book tells the story of that. So, in conclusion, my husband was a gun owner long before the Heller Amendment of 2008. As said, we both attend the American Firearms School, and we will continue to do so. But we would also like very much a membership at the new Brookside Shooting Sports as well, when the complex is up and running. Nate and I are both in full support of, and we value Brookside's stated goal, the correct education in and use of firearms. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Anyone else in the audience care to ask a question or make a comment? All right, then.
There's a question via chat. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, we have a question. That's right, from the board. It says, the question is, how high would a fence need to be at the property line in order to reduce noise emanating from the building? And would the board allow a special exemption for fence height in this scenario? So let's at the first part of that. I don't know. I presume it would have to be as high as the building, but I don't know that for a fact.
Whose question was that?
It's a question from someone on the Zoom call.
Oh, okay.
Do you have a name there?
Jennifer Salvi.
Jennifer
Salvi.
Salvi. Okay, it's Peter's wife. Okay.
A fence over 6 feet needs a special permit from the building department.
Yeah, right. So anyway, could you take a stab at the answer to that question? How high would it have to be?
Yeah, I can, this is Doug Bell. I can, there was a comment that it has to be as tall as building. That is somewhat correct in that essentially you have to break line of sight between the source and the receptor, whatever they are. You wouldn't put the barrier at the property line of the shooting range. You'd put it as close to the building as you could to the source so that you would take advantage of the best acoustic properties of the barrier. So one might, if it, and again, this is an if then, kind of, if you had to fix something that hopefully doesn't need to be fixed, then essentially you'd be just building another exterior wall to the building. So instead of having 2 concrete walls, you'd have potentially 3.
Yeah, I was thinking as I was reading the question, I was thinking of the sound barrier walls that you see alongside highways that have that mitigating property. Yeah. Keep the noise level from the highway from getting into, or at least cutting it down, getting into the adjacent neighborhoods. And I don't know whether the board would entertain that, but again, that's a what if for down the road after we do the post construction and get the operation up and running and measure the sound level again. Exactly. To find out what's going on. That would be possibly one of, who knows, a dozen different ways to mitigate a problem if it exists. Okay, any other questions coming in from Zoom, by the way? Betsy, you see anything?
Any hands up? Any hands up?
I don't. Yeah.
I don't see any.
It's hard. No?
I want to add.
Please take a microphone and identify yourself.
My name's Mark Clarisi. I live at 22 Everett Street in Norfolk. And I've been shooting for probably 55 years. And you can carry on a conversation inside the non-shooting range of an indoor range. And, you know, the range is behind you, the people are behind closed doors. So by the time it gets outside, think of it this way. The dogs are in their kennels, and it's raining out, and raindrops are hitting wood or metal. If they hear it, that's what they're going to hear. I mean, just to give you an idea, with the way these guys are engineering this, and I've been in them, I belong to a club that has an indoor range.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, should we close the public hearing on the PMLD?
Yep. Yes.
Yes.
Recommend it, yes.
Yeah, all right, so we need to move on to the second phase of this. All right, so Chair will entertain a motion to close the public hearing on the plan, special permit for the planned multi-lot development.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Searle?
Aye.
Mr. Montfort?
Aye.
Mr. Peck?
Aye.
Mr. Weddleton?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, so that phase is closed. You have permission to scrunch them together. All right, now the second part for this evening on your proposal is site plan special permit approval and stormwater management permit, which is continued from our last meeting. Is there anything else that Rich, that you need to speak of, or Phil needs to speak of before we move on this part of it?
I don't believe
We
so.
covered a lot of it in the other discussion, but
Yeah, you have. I think you've covered all the topics.
covered all the topics, yeah. Phil, last shot. Anything you want to say, you want to add before we?
No, I'm good.
You're good. Okay.
Just those few conditions and we'll be good.
Yeah. Okay. One of which, of course, is that test after the thing is up and running for sound level. Okay. So then I think we need to close the public hearing on this special permit as well. Any further questions from the board before we take that action? All right, then the Chair will entertain a motion to close the public hearing for the site plan special permit approval and stormwater management permit for the 262 Dedham Street shooting facility.
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
All right. Any further discussion before we take the vote?
Nope.
All right, roll call vote. Mr. Searle?
Aye.
Mr. Montfort?
Aye.
Mr. Peck?
Aye.
Mr. Weddleton?
Just one point, before we close this, and I'm assuming Rich is going to write up a,
Yeah, we're writing, preparing a decision for the...
Decision, yes.
I would like to make sure that, number one, the two conditions, which being the testing, probably after it's up for a year,
Yep.
in the sidewalk that's going to connect Shire Ave to Sharon Ave, be included in this project, as they agreed to if...
Yeah, I understand, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
We can, fair, but we can give him instructions for how to write the decision after we do this.
Vote to
Okay.
close the hearing.
Yeah, fair. So you vote yes. Okay, Chair votes yes, so that's closed as well. All right, so we will proceed with our town planner to write up the decision, which we will sign and get into your hands shortly. Good luck with the project. It will be, I think, a benefit to the townspeople.
Thank you, Board. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, and I hope to see you all at the Brookside Shooting Sports.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, folks.
Thank you, you too.
All right. All right, the next item on our agenda is 92-100 R Pond Street site plan approval and stormwater management permit for proposed large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic system. And we have been provided with a request for continuance to the next meeting. Is that right, Rich?
That is correct.
Okay, so we need a motion to continue that public hearing until our next meeting on April 28th, which is a Thursday, correct?
Correct.
7:15.
at 7:15.
So moved.
So moved, all right. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote, Mr. Searle.
Aye.
Mr. Montfort.
Aye.
Mr. Peck.
Aye.
Mr. Weddleton.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So we'll continue that. It's unfortunate that they couldn't be here this evening.
So basically, our next meeting, the quorum ends.
That's right.
We start anew.
Unless we squeeze one more meeting in.
No.
No, we're done.
You trying to do that?
We're done.
Good luck.
I don't think we could, Walter,
Yeah,
because
we could.
I'm out.
Fair enough. But I mean, time-wise is enough to give a public notice and squeeze it in. I don't want to do it, but
okay.
I think you just want to re-up.
no. Don't write me in either. Don't write me in either.
This gives me a good idea,
That's
Walter.
his threat, you know? Okay,
All right.
let's see. Next item on the agenda is, I'm going to skip Southwood for now and go to 3 David
That'd be
Road.
great.
That's a good decision.
Great
Yeah.
decision.
All right.
And then we come back.
Yeah, we'll come back.
Yep.
3 David Road, request for temporary occupancy permit.
That was,
I think Beta has pretty much agreed that things are fine, with a couple of recommendations at the end of their letter here.
yeah, it's a short 2-pager from Beta.
Yep.
Yeah. The applicant indicated that it would probably, to give them about 90 days just to finish the landscape, to make sure they get the plants.
Yeah.
So, so if the board's amenable to that, you can instruct the building commissioner to issue a conditional temporary,
With the 90-day limit.
90-day limit.
Yep.
And,
We vote in support of that.
correct, yeah.
All right, so the chair will entertain a motion to request that the building commissioner issue a temporary occupancy permit for 90 days from today for 3 David Road. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote, Mr. Searle.
Aye.
Mr. Montfort.
Aye.
Mr. Peck.
Aye.
Mr. Weddleton.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, so that gentleman now has his occupancy permit. Temporary.
No, he was
No,
just,
you're good, okay.
No,
You waited all that time for that.
yeah,
Well, it's
you just
important.
don't know. You just don't know.
Don't know,
right?
that's right.
Can't predict the future.
Okay,
Wasn't needed.
next up is Norway Farms subdivision. Request for release and discharge of all lots 1 through 14 from the Affordable Housing Covenant. Final payment has been received in lieu of building affordable units there. Rich, you want to comment on that before we?
My only comment is, well, maybe only, but I believe it was successfully executed in terms of, that was the payment schedule. The applicant fulfilled all his payments, provided them to the town, and I think it stands as a kind of a template going forward for other projects when we look to do,
From that point of view,
from
yeah.
a-
Rich, have all the lots been released in this subdivision?
not all the lots have
Right,
been
so we gotta
released, but
make-
this is just.
This
a
is,
for-
we got to
yeah.
make sure it's
Covenant,
just
yeah.
for, yeah.
Yeah, this
okay.
is just for the affordable covenant, that's it.
Okay.
So, I know you did receive an email from an abutter. That's not related to this subject tonight.
That's true.
That's something that I've emailed Rob to make him aware of it.
Well, let's we'll
Yeah.
come to that in a second.
All right, sorry,
Let's
jumped
just
ahead,
get this
but-
one, is
I
there any?
recommend releasing this.
You recommend releasing them from the covenant, all right.
Correct.
So therefore, the chair will entertain a motion to release and discharge all lots from the Affordable Housing Covenant for Norway Farms.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Montfort, all right. Roll call vote, Mr. Searle.
Aye.
Mr. Montfort.
Aye.
Mr. Peck.
Aye.
Mr. Weddleton.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay.
That's the end.
Now,
of that.
let's just
my last
touch
name's
quickly on that email
wrong.
that we
Last name on
received.
that one's wrong.
We re- What?
My last name's spelled wrong.
Oh,
Just letting Betsy know before we sign it.
Yep, yep.
I can actually reprint and have you guys sign that.
Thank you.
okay.
Hi, Chris.
No worries. It happens.
So your email.
Well,
Yeah, so now the email, let's see, we received an email from an abutter who also provided within that a video link to a walk that the abutter took on the front half of the walkway that is put through the easement, and complained that the construction of the walkway was, first of all, inadequate in the sense that the surrounding ground was disturbed and not properly seeded, and secondly, that the crushed stone in the walkway was inadequate to prevent the weeds from coming up, and the weeds were several feet high, which were quite visible and halfway down the walkway, there was a temporary orange plastic fence put up with a no trespassing sign.
Those are cool.
No, those were the key elements of that, and he was looking for some relief from all of that, and I think the abutter.
You mean you wanted to correct it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he wanted it.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think we need, at some point, as we proceed to finish releasing lots, et cetera, to discuss that. Now, you've passed that on to Rob, so...
Yeah, I emailed Rob today. I did copy the Rileys on it in terms of sending that out.
Yeah.
And I'll be off next week. I said to Rob when I get back from vacation, we need to circle back and we could have this on the agenda for the May 16th.
The fence should be taken down immediately, number one. You can't block an easement with a fence. Number two, if you have a crushed stone pathway, which I remember us going at, he's got to be resolved that the money that's in his account for maintaining of the open space would be also to pull those weeds. So if you didn't put the proper gravel base down on that, you're probably going to have a continuum of weeds, or there's just not enough crushed stone there. But
Can you put that drawing up that I sent you? It was part of the decision. I extracted it from the original decision on Norway Farms, just so we can get a look at how long this thing is. And it goes down the hill from the adjacent cul-de-sac down into the Norway Farms
it
property.
connects the two cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, it does, that's right, yeah. But just, I don't want to beat this to death tonight, but I just wanted to bring it to the attention of the board. We'll deal with it subsequently. Yeah, there we go. So there's Crestbrook Road, where it originates. That easement runs from Crestbrook Road down the hill there, and that you can see the walkway delineated, and then it ties in down to the lower right to the other cul-de-sac end.
that was put in there in lieu of him having to connect the street to that Crestbrook road.
Yeah. Originally...
Can someone show that on the screen, please? I am the abutter on the call. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I don't know, can you show that on the Zoom?
I think Andy got it.
Yes,
You can see that
thank
right,
you.
Karen?
Can you see it?
Yes, Walter, thank you very much.
Okay.
Karen, is the walkway walkable without the fence there, just for the sake of...
It is not, John. If he took that fence down, it would not be safe.
It's okay.
And that is one of the reasons he put it up.
Okay, I get it. I thought it was...
It's not a safe walkway. Even though people can still walk from our side down to that fence.
It shouldn't be a
it's
trip
not
hazard.
safe.
It shouldn't be a trip hazard. So basically,
It is
all of the
currently.
stone should be compacted so it's not a trip
Yeah,
hazard.
it's not done very well.
Okay,
So
thank
we will
you.
address that, but not tonight. And we need Rob here to discuss it with us, so. But thank you for raising it. We will deal with it.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on Norway Farms, Rich, before we move on?
No.
Okay, next item is MacArthur Avenue definitive subdivision. Review and approve the decision for a roadway improvement plan for one existing lot on MacArthur Avenue off the end of Hunter Avenue. And I think we have the decision in our package. We've reviewed it, and we should be prepared this evening, I believe, to sign it.
Yep.
And so I think we've already taken the vote to approve this. Is that correct, last meeting?
Yeah.
Voted to close the hearing.
Yeah, we
Close the hearing, we didn't approve it.
kind of privileged to see it, so.
Yeah. If you close the public hearing, this will be the vote to approve it.
Picky. All
So I
right.
have forwarded, so that, what's before you has been submitted to the applicant and their attorney. I believe they didn't have any issues what's been drafted, so.
Okay. All right, so this is a, how many pages is this thing? It's, looks like it's 7 pages, okay. Okay, so I need further discussion on this before we take a motion and vote to approve it. All right, then the chair will entertain a motion to approve the planning board certificate of approval of a definitive plan dated April 12th, 2022 for roadway improvement plan, MacArthur Avenue, Norfolk, Massachusetts.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Mr. Searle?
Aye.
Mr. Montfort?
Aye.
Mr. Peck?
Aye.
Mr. Weddleton?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, so that one is easy. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, great. So now we can,
Okay, so, where are we here? Gotta go back to Southwood.
We're
Yeah,
back to
we'll
Southwood,
circle
yeah.
back to Southwood, okay? And presumably we have,
yeah, Josh is on the top of your screen.
Josh is there. Oh, gosh, there he is again, right.
Good evening. Welcome back, Josh.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, Josh.
Yeah.
Good to see you all.
You as well.
So in terms of Josh's presentation, it was posted on the website for tonight. I sent it out to folks and then forwarded to you as well.
Yeah.
So really, Josh will get into his presentation before he starts. Really, this is really the start, the kickoff of this. It's not intended to be a deep dive for tonight. Just kind of set the context of it, and then we'll go forward and dive a little. We'll be diving deeper into various topics on it. But I'll just say that at the outset, and I'll step back and let Josh
Well,
go.
one question I have before we start is, what is the relationship between the town and the organization that Josh represents and the property owners? How is that set up?
In terms
Is it an
of,
informal basis? Is it is there a written document that kind of captures it all, or is it?
no, well, the written document, there is a formal relationship between MAPC as a contract and the town.
Right.
In terms of the property owner, they're a participant in the study like the general public. They're not,
Okay, fair ence.
and they are, I can see them, they're on the call to listen in tonight
Yep.
to observe it, but
Okay.
there are no contractual arrangements between those three parties.
That's
so.
what I wanted to be put on the record. Okay.
Right.
Take it, Josh.
Josh, do you want me to make you host so you can?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Planning Board, for having me this evening to talk about the project. Do you want me to share my screen, or do you want to share
Make you host so you can screen share.
somewhere else? Let me do that?
Yep, go ahead. You should be good.
Yeah? All right. I will share. All right. Can you all see that fine?
Yep.
All right, great. So I just wanted to give a brief introduction and background presentation to the Norfolk Southwood Hospital property site reuse and zoning analysis. This is the kickoff discussion with the planning board and gives you a feel, and the general public a feel for this process, and answers some of the questions like you just raised, Chair. The presentation breaks into 3 basic parts. And again, just to start off, my name is Josh Fiala, a principal planner with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And I'll talk a little bit about what MAPC is in a moment, but just to get my name on the record. The presentation breaks into 3 parts: a study introduction, a background and research, and a brief summary of some next steps. I'll just walk you through that so that you have a feel, and the general public has a feel for what this is about. So first, an introduction. This is a planning study for the Southwood Hospital, sometimes referred to as the Pondville Hospital. The planning study is to explore the potential future reuse of the property, to define and document the community's preferences for the property. The hope is that we can identify shared goals that will help guide the property owner and the development team's plans. We'll be recommending zoning modifications that align with the community's preferences, vision, and goals for the property. One of those zoning options is a voluntary state program through the Department of the Housing and Community Development, DHCD, and that's the 40R Smart Growth Overlay District. That is not yet decided as an outcome, but this process will explore the potential benefits of this program for the town. And if desired, we have built into our scope, which Rich mentioned as a part of our contract with the town, to advance materials to apply to DHCD for that special overlay. But again, that's to be determined based upon the discussions with you all in the community. The partners in this project, to get a little more into detail about the question that was raised. So these are the formal partners. The town and MAPC will be coordinating directly and are contracted together. And then there's another party which is involved, which is the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, EEA. And they're providing the most substantial portion of the funding through a grant from the state to the town of Norfolk, which Norfolk applied for. The town is also applying some supplemental funding to that, and MAPC is providing some supplemental funding as well through our technical assistance program to the town. Throughout this process, we will be in communication with GFI, the property owner and developer, but they are not funding or directing this work. And as you will see, the focus will be on communication and collaboration with the general public through community meetings and community workshops. MAPC, just a little bit more background. I know that the board is aware, but some in the general public might not be. MAPC is the regional planning agency that serves the 101 cities and towns in the greater Boston area. This includes Norfolk and all of your neighbors. I've recently assisted your neighbors in the towns of Millis, Walpole, and Rentham on similar and other planning efforts, master plans, open space and recreation plans, and the like. Our mission is to promote smart growth and regional collaboration and work toward natural resource protection, diverse housing options, economic development, and healthy communities. Many of those themes of our mission are touched upon at this Southwood property. Here are a few aerial images that you're all well aware of, the property, which is the subject of the study, just to ground those a little bit and get out of words and a little bit more into pictures. But I think I have a few good ways to think about this process, hopefully clarify what this is all about. One way to think about this study is really a search for shared interests, and that's through transparent engagement and open communication. We're trying to define and find the interests that lie between the town at large, the surrounding neighbors, and the property owners. Finding as many shared interests as possible will expand the likelihood of desirable outcomes occurring on the property. This is a more complicated project and process than this diagram implies, but it's good to keep in mind this fundamental relationship that we're really trying to find shared interests and shared outcomes that would be beneficial to all parties. Another way to think about it is really to find the right balance. So we're trying to open the door for as many solutions as make sense for this property from all these various perspectives. It's a complicated property with its own constraints, already shutting the door for some of the opportunities. This is a general planning study trying to approximate what solutions may be feasible under those constraints. We're trying to open the door wide enough so that as many good and community-supported solutions are identified as possible. It's important to note that we're not designing the specific outcome for the property. While we will be considering constraints such as environmental remediation, we will not be creating any new content in that regard. We will also be considering other constraints such as the physical attributes of the property or other potential impacts to the community that may constrain potential outcomes. Our study will not be able to resolve all of these issues, of course. That is not really even our responsibility. We're focused on the opportunity and framework that the town zoning bylaw establishes for the property. The owner and their team will then respond to and execute within that framework. We're hopeful that this planning process will result in a more predictable process for the development team with community support built into the resulting zoning framework. The town of Norfolk is not alone in dealing with former state hospital properties. These are 3 examples, but there are more across the Commonwealth. First up on the top, there's the Village Hill, Northampton, which is a 126-acre master plan community based on new urbanist principles. It combines 300,000 square feet of commercial research and development and light industrial uses and 350 mixed income homes and residential units, complemented with open space. In the middle is Chestnut Green, a 93-acre amenity-rich mixed-use campus in Foxborough with 100,000 square feet of office, 40,000 square feet of retail, and 55 multifamily units. It was a long-abandoned former state hospital transformed into that mixed-use project under an ambitious plan. And at the bottom of these 3 examples is the Metropolitan State Hospital reuse in Lexington and surrounding communities. And this was after a 15-year process to rehabilitate or to redevelop the institution for mental health patients, which closed. There was a much debated reuse plan for the massive property, and that's been implemented. On a corner of the former state hospital grounds sits the Avalon at Lexington Hills, a 387-unit complex. The rest of the nearly 500-acre property, which straddles the boundaries of those surrounding communities, remains largely as woodlands, fields, and marshes, crisscrossed with rustic trails. And that's all managed by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. In each case, what I would point out as the similarities here, the common feature, is a dense and robust development program that provides the financial foundation for the scale of investment that is required to make these properties productive again. So it takes some shoulders to bear the weight of the remediation and reuse efforts on these massive former state hospital properties. As we all know, this process, our process, the planning study, is a small part of a much longer and larger effort. The hospital was closed in 2003. I know there are many neighbor historians and advocates who know much more about the long history of the property all the way back to its founding in 1912. The redevelopment efforts have started and stopped along the way over the previous decades. And even this current effort includes many parallel efforts, including the Public Involvement Plan, PIP, and remediation planning, development planning, eventual development with demolition and construction processes, and other ongoing and future efforts. This study is projected to run only about a year to get the town set up with those zoning modifications that I mentioned. And hopefully that can then be supported and approved at a subsequent town meeting. This process may help to support or inform some of those parallel activities, but there are much larger and longer standing processes underway that will continue subsequent to this planning effort, which is just really a blip in this longer trajectory of the property. So I'll pause there and just see if the board has any questions or comments about that first introductory section.
Continue.
Keep going.
All right, we'll keep going. Thank you, Chair. So I'll go a little bit quicker now. I threw in a few slides that are a snapshot of our initial research and investigation, but I did want to show a few about the site itself. So the overall property boundaries are shown roughly. I would note that we do need to reconcile our property boundaries with those identified in the public involvement plan and make sure that we've got exactly the same parcels. I've noticed that our overall outline here is a little different from that outline previously presented by the property owner. Overall, the property is highlighted here with some of its statistics, about 88 acres. Again, a long history on the property with the state hospital, lots of milestones, including it being associated with the first efforts around cancer research and some real significance around its property history. In 2020, there was the investment group, the current property owner, and they presented a concept to the planning board, including a distribution warehouse potentially, and that I believe was a catalyst for this study, this planning study, to help look at potential reuse opportunities and options, which would be hopefully better aligned with what the community would like to see on the property. Here's the property context in the southeast corner of the town, with a neighboring context also in the town of Walpole, and small portion of the property itself is in Walpole as well, one of the parcels. Years ago, all communities in the region identified priority development and preservation areas. You can see that the Southwood Hospital property was identified in orange as a priority development area. So it's been sort of on the long-term roster of sites which are of importance and wanted to be seen as a more active and economically productive part of the town. Here's another view of the property context as well. The topography on the property is something to note, and that's shown in the diagram on the screen now. And so the topography flows from a high point at the Walpole town line across the site. You can see some of the neighboring properties are also at a higher elevation relative to the property itself. After viewing the topography, the wetland locations make a little more sense with the water flowing down along the property to the area in green on this diagram. A wellhead protection area is also present in that portion of the property. And some flooding areas are highlighted and outlined along the Stop River, which is adjacent to the property itself. In addition to these diagrams, which we have started as a part of our initial investigation, we'll also be adding locations of contamination on the property, which is an important topic and important consideration in terms of those locations and then the potential reuse options that we'll be exploring. And here's another view of the property with the existing structures which still remain. The property is about 88 acres in total, as I mentioned. If you remove the wetland and the wellhead protection areas, that leaves about 75 acres remaining, which are shown in the yellow on the diagram on the screen now. And then this depicts the paved areas, which are shown concentrated in and around the existing buildings. Significantly also, I'll mention that the proposed route of the Metacomet Greenway is directly abutting the property and will be a potentially great benefit to the property in connecting its future development through multimodal connections to the surrounding areas. In addition to looking at the physical attributes and constraints of the site itself, we have been looking at a review of the past plans, and we invite either through the board or the general public referral to other plans which might not yet be on this list, including also the property owner if there are plans or more recent documents which we may not have a hold of yet. And so we're looking through these to make sure that we have a solid foundation and understanding of what's been previously explored. And also looking at the documents which form the foundation for the town's perspective on this property. So that includes the zoning bylaw, of which there is a zoning district today for the property, the housing production plan, which is currently being updated, but the most recent version we have from 2017, and the Norfolk master plan from 2007. And so each of those documents do actually mention the property, and I'll just touch on that mentioning now. So the housing production plan states to work with the owners to redevelop the property with a mixed-use housing development with a significant affordable housing component and expansion of the diversity of Norfolk's housing stock, which is primarily single-family today. There's some additional language from the housing production plan. I won't dwell on that tonight. And some other items from the plan. The Norfolk master plan indicates that the property is within the open space goals to clean up contaminated sites near valuable open space. And it includes reference to the Southwood Hospital along Stop River Corridor. The current zoning, the zoning primarily on the property today is zoned C6, commercial 6 zoning, with a small portion in the R3 district, I believe. It's also within the Aquifer Water Resource Protection Zone. In section C6, that zone is in section L under the town bylaws. So section L would be the primary focus of our zoning review and work. So I've included just some of the subsections from section L, just to give a feel for what those items are. So the overall purpose of section L. General district requirements. Again, I'm not going to go into these detail this evening, spare you. I know that you've already had an extensive meeting tonight. And these will be the characteristics which will be subject to modification and revision based upon the community's goals, priorities, and vision for the property. And then we'll be reviewing those in detail with both the board and the community throughout this process. The lot and yard requirements and standards, again, also subject to consideration based upon the visioning. Some more of the zoning items there. There's also sign regulations and parking regulations specific to the district, and then extensive listing of allowed uses and prohibited uses and special permit uses. So these will all be subject to review and then modification based upon the community preferences. So maybe I'll just go ahead and wrap this up, then you all can go ahead and ask any questions or clarification remarks. In terms of next steps for this process, I just wanted to outline this process clearly because not to let people know what to expect and to hopefully avoid any misunderstanding. But we're really at the start of this process. This is the very beginning, our first conversation with the board, first conversation in a public setting. We will be doing outreach to neighborhood groups, the property owner, and trying to have some more conversations and get acquainted with all the various parties, and have put together a pretty simple and straightforward engagement strategy, which we can have shared with the town planner, and we can share with the planning board as well, and the general public. The goal over the next month or so is to prepare ourselves for a community workshop, which would be the first session to really focus on a discussion through exercises and engaging opportunities in that meeting to learn more from the community directly about what's hoped for and anticipated on this property, so we can begin to define what that vision and set of goals and priorities look like. We will then be looking at how that might relate to the existing set of regulations, which I just skipped through with you all, and what kind of zoning tools would best be suited to that vision for the property and what those zoning concepts look like. We'd be coming back to the planning board to talk about those with you all and have you guide us and direct us on that, and be working closely with the town planner throughout this process. Then we'd be returning to the community for another workshop with some of those draft zoning concepts in hand to get additional feedback at another community workshop, potentially in September or thereabout. And then would potentially, this is where our scope has potentially a decision point. If it looks like at that point a 40R district is appropriate as an outcome or a solution to the priorities and goals defined by the community, we would have enough sort of scope and budget left to prepare application, which is its own process, to DHCD, as I mentioned. And if that's not the outcome, which looks like it makes sense, then we would use that time and budget in whichever way it does make sense to support the zoning recommendations for the town. And then this process will continue toward the end of 2022 and into 2023, and basically set the town up for a bylaw adoption, whatever those bylaw revisions may be. And that process, as we experienced together in the B1 zoning, could require its own effort. But we have in our contract to support you through that. So that's why the timeline kind of gets a little dotted and fuzzy there, because it's not completely clear what town meeting, for example, you might be headed for with these zoning recommendations, or how that process leading up to it might take shape. We might know more as this process advances and what those outcomes look like. So in terms of very next steps, we will continue our deepening our dive into the existing materials and documents preparing for a community workshop to gather those first inputs, as we mentioned. In that community workshop, we've scheduled Richard McCarthy and myself, the town planner, for Monday, June 6th at 7 p.m. And right now we're planning on that being a hybrid event. So we would have both, as you're doing so capably with your planning board meeting, a Zoom component and an in-person component at the town hall. And that would be, we'll set it up so that the experience, hopefully, and the engagement that can occur is similar for either an in-person or virtual attendee. So with that, finally, thank you for your patience, but that hopefully gives you an orientation to everything we're thinking about and what this project is about. And happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Josh, 2 points come to mind. One, recently, the state has announced that a property across the street is going to be closed, namely the prison, Cedar Junction Prison, over the next 2-year period. I don't know how, if at all, that would impact what we're thinking about here, but just keep that in mind. And number two, back a few years, there was an attempt by a fellow from New Jersey to come in and develop this property, and ultimately it didn't go forward. But among the things that were done in preparation for that to happen was a draft development agreement between the town and that developer. And within that draft agreement is a number of concerns that the town had about the effect of that property development upon the town and the mitigation that we wanted the developer to agree to, and by and large he had. So if you haven't got a copy of that, that's one of the many pieces of literature that you ought to get a hold of. I'm sure Rich can provide it to you. Just add that to the pot, that's all.
Very good insights. Thank you for that. I'll make sure to take a close look at that. And in terms of Cedar Junction, I do think, we should have that in our mind in terms of planning for the future of this area, and think about how maybe that large property could be a part of a larger concentration of development over time, and how they might complement each other. But it might be a little soon to do more specific investigation in terms of what that might look like.
Comments or questions from the board?
No, appreciate the time. That was a good presentation.
I would say I really like the projected timeline. That was really nice. I know that's come up often amongst others, is what is the plan? And I realize that the plan is still a little bit fluid, but just having that rough guideline is extremely helpful. So I appreciate that.
Okay, well, thank you, Josh. We appreciate it, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board. I look forward to it as well, and happy to be back in Norfolk with you all.
Okay, all right, let's see, back to our agenda here. Next up is town planner updates. I know you're turning into a pumpkin, I know that.
Well, you took care of one of them.
It's like having a big party, but it gets
9 o'clock, John turns into a pumpkin.
It's a little hungry. The only other business item in terms of update to the board is got scheduled perk test tomorrow over at behind the Freeman Kennedy for the wastewater treatment plant.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
once we get the perk test done, we'll evaluate what the results are, and then we'll go from there, which it would be potentially bring in the hydrogeologist to do more drilling, to figure out the profile. So I suspect that probably for the May meeting, the May 16th meeting, I probably should have some outcome, some results to share with the board from that. So stay tuned.
Good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good.
I have a question.
Yes.
When we gave the study here, reminded me of it. Like I said, it's like planning a big party, but the person having a party for doesn't even know he's having one. May not even be in the country. The sidewalk, we used our $77,000 for the study. So
Yes.
now I'm told we can't get any funding because we have no money for engineering. That's what I mean, that's what I told the Barry accountable for. We're gonna get these funding, we're gonna do so, oh, good, okay, I give in. Take the 75,000 or do another study.
yeah.
We have a lot of studies in town. There's like hundreds of them at the DPW. Right, so now we found out, how's our funding for the sidewalks? Well, we need money to do engineering because they have to be shovel-ready. Engineering's pretty expensive, as you know.
Right.
So we get another study.
So we have the framework through the study, you're right, I get it.
Only being cynical, I apologize. It's
Wait
late
a
on
minute,
time.
the pot of money that we dipped into to fund that study was more than what the study cost. It was like half, as I remember. So there should be a half left.
Is there a half left?
There's still money in the
How
sidewalk
much,
fund.
how
Yes.
much is left? How much did they use for the study?
I think it was 40,000, I think, somewhere in there.
It's more like 60 is what I remember.
Yeah, I do too. Anyways.
Well,
But we didn't use it all. That's
point taken.
Yeah.
There is money in the sidewalk fund to go to the next level, so, but the larger point from DPW is that we need to actually, the town
We need money.
pragmatically have money available to shovel ready
Yeah,
to get these
so you
projects
can get the
done.
grants done.
But that wasn't mentioned when we took the money for the study. I forget it. If I might have forgot. I'm old, I forgot. I just thought it might.
I don't think it was mentioned, John,
I thought
but
everything was included in the numbers that we saw in the presentation.
What's that? Well, there is, you mean in terms of costs and
Yeah.
engineering and all that? It is all in there. The point of John's though is that
That's only
Yeah.
engineering for the study. That's a different type of engineering.
Yeah, yeah, I
Now you gotta engineer every sidewalk and do the math and figure out what it's
yeah,
gonna
the
cost.
study's like a phase one. I mean, there's 3 phases. That the study's the phase 1. The phase 2 is the actual design, and then phase 3 is when you go to
And
construction.
again, not to be cynical, but I think in my 20 years, knowing the DPW well, I think we have, I would say, well over 100 studies of every intersection in this town, every crosswalk, every sidewalk, and almost none of them were put up. We actually paid the engineering firm the town had hired $240,000 a year to do studies. We finally decided that we don't need these engineers because nothing's happening because there's a lot more components. That's all. That's why I guess I get a little dumbfounded here. We're talking about rezoning Southwood and the community. This builder, I mean, it's his land. We don't own the land. We're going to change zoning. We don't know what he wants to do. We have no idea what he wants to do.
Correct.
We're going to change zoning. We're going to bring some people to change zoning. It seems like that, the main party, I'd be offended if somebody wanted to tell me how to develop my land, and the zoning on Southwood is so extensive. Was done, and Walt was on the Economic Development Committee. It allows most everything.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, this guy is going to make a profit big enough to pay a $20 million land cost and make money and make it worth it. So basically, the components of what he's going to do has to have that profit factor. And I don't care if the town wants open space or walkways or retail. It's all about a financial plan that this man's going to develop, owning the property, to decide what he wants to do. It just seems like all of this involvement, we don't have a clue with this guy. I mean, he at least should be in there with I know studies are free, we get them, okay. But we should at least have an idea what direction he's going in. Because if he's going in a direction, he wants nothing to do with 40R. Why are we going to get everybody upset? You getting upset. Because we're talking 40R, which has minimum density of 10, 20 stories. We looked at this years ago, another study incidentally, and we looked at the 40R and decided, wow, minimum density for Kelly's property that now has 32 units was 220 units, minimum.
Wow.
I mean, it's
We looked at that 40R for B1 too, and it wasn't that high because we could have put
Well, they
40R
changed it a little
overlay.
bit then, but it's pretty high. But again,
It's higher than we are used to in Norfolk.
But again, I think you determine the 40R the owner's got to want and start the ball rolling, rather than us going through and figuring out the parameters of a 40-hour, which is another town vote. The owner's got to be a part of this.
I don't disagree with you to play devil's advocate. It's an avenue for the town and the residents to try to own that, right? To
Well,
say,
they can,
here's what
but
we
if
want.
the owner's not for it, you're going through all this rigmarole.
Well, the guy knows, the people, rather, they know that this is going on. They've been told that 40-hour is one possibility, and they didn't say, well, forget that.
That was my point. I mean, why aren't they involved in this whole
Well,
thing?
that's my point. When up front,
Excuse me, but, we got a free study, we got the study before we had an owner, so it made sense. But now it's kind of awkward doing all this stuff, and here's the guy owning it, and he could well walk away tomorrow because the cost of cleanup is too much, and then we all lose.
But under the rules of engagement that you open this with, that it's the town's money, it's Josh from MAPC. What aside from them being on the line today, they can't make decisions about how the money's spent. And it's already, you have the funding for it, right? It's through the state.
Right.
So it's not that
So if we go back and how we landed here in terms of, as Josh presented, we talked about December of 2020. They came forward with a proposal that before they purchased the property for potential use that was rebuffed by the residents as a development option there.
Oh, yeah, that was easy.
Right.
But right now, there's so many different things they can do on that site that...
Now we're into this, I'll call it the second phase, or whatever you want to call it, reiteration of looking to where the circles come all together, that it's something that everybody could get their support around.
My point
Because
is, you don't want to turn these people away, because if they start to be over-controlled, over-regulated, well, they're going to be spending a fortune. And the best thing ever happened in town, we're shooting to get cleaned up. We're cleaned up. And they're the one best chance that I know in Walter, in the years and years we've been through everybody, that haven't even got nearly this far. It's that significant a site. And just doing everything on the side from him, and I know it's free money.
But you're just enabling another option, right? There's no harm in doing what you're...
No, there is no harm, because it's free money. But that's my point. Just because something's free, you'd like to try to make it a little bit worthwhile. And to be worthwhile would be having an idea of what the developer wanted. Now, don't forget, let's go back. 3 months ago, we had some folks here. They were offended because Rich talked with the developer. We didn't see the plan, but maybe Chad did. Walter did, of just an idea of what they wanted to do. And they were offended.
I thought that was a 40R. Wasn't that?
No, that was not.
No.
So they were offended. The town people were offended. Why are you doing this before the cleanup? And of course, I think it was a good thing to do, because you're going to do this in stages, the cleanup.
Yep.
Right, but here we are now. The town is going to figure out what they want to do, and we don't even know the extent of the cleanup. So it seems like a little bit been there, deja vu in reverse. That's all. But don't let me excuse my cynicism, because I've been through this a long time. I know about developing property, and I know it's involved, and a lot of these things may have these people just take their ball and move on. And when they do, this could be 20 years sitting again. That's all. That's my only point.
Well, and of course, the risk of that, relative to the cost of the cleanup, is that they paid peanuts for this property. Peanuts. Peanuts.
Yeah, this is nothing. This is just an adventure for them to see. Because to take that building down, we know is $8 to $10 million. Just take the building down. Forget about any hazardous waste. So you're talking a land cost, not $275,000. You're talking a land cost, probably $20 million.
Right.
Now, to produce that, and put structures up, and make a profit to pay off the land, cover all the costs in between, I mean, that's going to be a certain type of project that those pros are probably going to have an idea of how they can make it happen, or they wouldn't have bought the land. They wouldn't have got this far in the testing. But to come in and start to, I don't know, the community is doing right now what they told us, really, we shouldn't even be listening to them for ideas and development. That's what they're doing. That's what this is doing now, in reverse.
Well, I think
I remember being a sick on Zoom. I think it's a great idea. Let's have an idea what they want to do, because they're not going to go clean up the whole site and then say, okay, let's see, what are we going to do? No,
Correct.
it doesn't
They're
work
not.
that way.
It doesn't work that
So
way.
that was a great idea, but I think I might have been the only one from the Zoom connection that thought that.
No, it doesn't work.
This is Jane Dewey Walter. May I just say something?
Hi, Jane.
Yes, please.
Yeah, and also we have GFI representatives on the Zoom call too. So, but my understanding is that Rich and Blythe have had conversations with GFI, because I totally agree with you, John, that why go this 40R route if we don't know that GFI would be willing to do that? So, Rich, I hope you have spoken to them about that. Have you? Are they on board? Yeah.
they have. Yes.
Right. So let's just be open and honest. I mean, I know there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and I don't think we'd be going down this route unless the town was talking with GFI and GFI was on board, which makes sense. Otherwise, it's a total waste of money.
So,
But I just wish it were more open. I mean, John didn't even know that.
he knows that.
I didn't see the plan when they brought
Okay.
it. I learned after the fact that they had plans. They just
I
showed
don't
it
want to
to-
get into a counterpoint of everything I've said to everybody that they should know or not know. I could tell you I've had that discussion. I will say this. So GFI is on the call, right? So the idea is to come together as a partnership to make it happen. So it's sharing that common vision to make this happen. Because some people would say, I don't want that to happen that way. And to John's point, they may not be willing to come to that. So the idea of those circles is bring everybody together to have something that comes together. Because they have ideas and how to develop it. I can tell you some of the things that they'll probably tell you about that don't work right now from a zoning perspective to try to make this work economically. And
That's why it would be great to know right now.
so Bill popped his head on the screen. Bill, you want to add a couple points to clarify this?
Well, I think John, and sorry to interrupt, but I thought John's point was that, why go down this road if we don't know what GFI's thoughts are? And I'm saying, I think Rich already knows, but it would be great to hear from Bill.
Bill, please.
Sure. Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity. And my name is Bill Buckley, and I am with GFI Partners, and have been for the past year now. I'm actually, my colleague Jackie Bart is also on with us. So I guess I should first start by just thanking the town for taking the initiative to start to identify, I think, what are going to be acceptable uses on the site. Right? We know that that what GFI originally proposed didn't sit well with the town, and we quickly realized that that we want to work with the community, right? And that's what we do. It's what we try to do wherever we are. So I'd like to thank the town for that. I'd like to thank the board for allowing us to come to this presentation and participate tonight. We are in and I think that the board member said this, right, where we have been working really hard over the last few months to dig into the environmental piece of this, and in doing so, really trying to foster a positive relationship with the town, whether that be through Rich and Blythe, and as well as with the neighborhood PIP group. Right, they have a lot at stake in what needs to happen on the cleanup of that part. What we do know at this point, right, is that we want to be a partner in identifying and implementing a redevelopment plan here that results in our mutual goals. Right, we're convinced that we need each other to work together. It's clear to us that there is going to be some relief needed to the zoning. There are some components of the existing zoning that we could work with. We think that in order to make the project financially feasible, we anticipate some zoning amendments will be necessary. So in light of that, we want to engage with the community. We want to participate in this planning process. We intend to be active at any of the public meetings, and we want to be open and transparent and share what we can when we can. At this point, there is not I can say with certainty, there is not a clear development plan that we would pursue today if allowed to. We still have some market research that we're doing. We do like the idea that multifamily, an affordable multifamily project is something that that was identified in the housing production plan. We think that would be an important component of a redevelopment out there. We do like some of what exists in the zoning for prospective uses, but a lot of the density and to the degree of which the site needs to be developed, I think the board member said that, is, some of that's going to come down to what the costs are going to be to clean that up. So we're spending a lot of time on that right now. We've had crews out there actively looking at the building, actively looking at some of the testing that we're working with DEP on, and I've probably already said more than I intended to, but hopefully that's on point to the board's discussion.
So, Bill, just a question for you. You said you're going to be needing more than likely some zoning changes to make your project work. That being said, don't you think it's worth it to find out first what zoning changes you may need before we go in and create some?
Well, I think that's a very good point. I do think it's something that can be done kind of simultaneously, right? Because some of those changes are going to be, some of what is going to be allowed on the site and to what density and what degree we can do it, or that's going to unfold as we do additional environmental testing and as we continue to work with DEP on what our, as our experts will dictate what would be acceptable there. So I think that's going to evolve. If you were moving forward and proposing a zoning change for, in May, I might say that's premature, but I do think there'd be some time for us to have input and for us to participate in what those prospective zoning changes might be over the course of this calendar year. So it's we're trying to be a good partner and not necessarily trying to dictate to the town what the process should be, right? We think that there needs to be participation. So we don't think it's appropriate for us to dictate that at this stage.
Good. Good. Thank you, Bill. Any questions, fellas?
Nope.
Just give me some warm and fuzzies.
What's that?
I got the warm and fuzzies.
You got the warm and fuzzies. Okay, good.
All right, mission accomplished.
All right, thanks, Bill. Have a good evening.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to working with you.
Yep. Okay, sir, what else have we got on the agenda here?
That's all I have.
The only thing I'll say is that August 9th, we might need to change that. I'm not here, Rich isn't here, Chad's not here,
Betsy's not here.
Betsy's not here.
Whoa.
So why do you have to change the date?
Why change it?
Walt's not here, Gary's not here.
Yeah, we'll need to look. So,
John will be here.
I'm actually not here. That's really funny. I'm not here either.
so should we wait until we have our next board before we reschedule? So that would be
reasonable. Yeah.
Makes sense.
But that's a great point. Let's bring that up at the next meeting, or at the
Third, the
I don't know if
second.
Josh had something to
at the
say.
May meeting.
He was off mic for a while and we didn't stop talking. Hey, Josh, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just thank you for the opportunity. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say that the process that I outlined, I think we do have flexibility within that effort to respond to, both where the community wants to head and where the property owner wants to head. And we're not trying to force this process into a box. We have some constraints around when the funding needs to be spent based upon EEA's fiscal years, but we can adjust as needed. And if we get to a point where there's really a dramatic change that's required to serve the property and the community in the best way possible, we can even propose back to EEA that the scope needs to change in some dramatic way. So we aren't, to John's point, we don't need to have the town feel like we're just going through some sort of process which has already been predetermined if it's not the most helpful process. We want to facilitate the most helpful process because ultimately MAPC's goal is to help facilitate the development of this property in a way that reflects that smart growth perspective and gets this back into productive use. So we're happy to be flexible and adjustable.
Josh, they seem, from Bill's perspective, they seem very accommodating. I just think that it might be wise to bring them into the process earlier rather than later, so we don't go down dead ends where that really doesn't interest them, that's all.
You're saying if you do all the community engagement around a 40R, and that's not the direction, you've kind of wasted those steps.
Create zoning changes that they don't even need, they're thinking of something different.
Yeah, we're not, well, I can't say we're not. I wouldn't think the board would recommend zoning changes without knowing what the hell they want to do.
I'm just going by the...
By the timeline they
Yeah, I understand.
proposed, yes.
I was-
Right. So that the biggest risks seem to be around community engagement. If it was too narrow and you had to take those steps over
Well,
again.
community engagement is, Harry probably knows, it comes from everywhere, and you'll have 5 million different ideas on what should be, and the fact that the main idea should be coming from the developer. I mean, he still has to go through town permitting, but he should be, again, he should be in there from the early parts so we can have the right direction. And no one wants to waste any time, we don't want to waste the grant money, but it'd be nice to move along constructively with everybody on board, that's all.
Well, you gotta do it. You
That's
can't,
what-
you can't,
exactly.
you can't do.
And every time this man speaks, Bill, it's more encouraging that they're sticking in here to try to make something happen.
Yeah.
Which would make everybody in the town happy.
Yep.
So in terms of our community engagement, I think the objective would be to have some of those meetings with the groups before the June 6th meeting, so that way, we can report back at that point. So between the community groups, which we have
We
on
had a
our...
community engagement meeting set up, Josh, years ago for Southwood, and we were deciding what really should get together, and we had only probably, Jane was around, but we probably only had 20 or 30 folks. But what ended up being the main item on the community engagement was whether we should have a pot roast dinner, or just have sandwiches, or what the snack should be. I'm not making it up. That was the input from the community engagement.
Easy enough to satisfy that.
Yeah.
Even if you made all three.
I think the town is, well, that's interesting. Huh?
It is interesting. We thought it was just,
I think the town is probably way more engaged now than they were back then.
All right, on that note, I think that the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
We're getting burnt, yes.
So moved. We have a second. And we have a second, a third even, probably. All right, so a roll call vote. Mr. Searle.
Aye.
Mr. Monfort.
Aye.
Mr. Peck.
Aye.
Mr. Whittleton.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Now, we're going to hang around and sign a bunch of documents that Betsy's got in front of us here.